Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. What if Naruto was semi-autistic? This is the first part of. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Uzumaki Naruto, aged 5.5, stared in plain horror at the dead bodies of his caretakers. He had seen the puddles of red that formed beneath their still bodies, and he knew instinctually that they were never going to move again. Ever. Naruto choked back a sob. They had been kind enough to look after him until he could take care of himself, though they never showed him any affection or disapproval like the other parents did with their children. But it was enough at least. It was better than how the rest of the village had treated. Then he turned to the killer, and he suddenly felt very angry. He was the one who had taken his caretakers from him. With a growl he leapt at the masked ninja, pounding futilely at the waist of the attacker. The attacker scowled, ignoring the boy on his legs. He performed a long set of seals before touching the blonde head of the child. The boy screamed, clutching his head as if in great pain before he went limp, his bright eyes dulling quickly. As Shinobi smiled, the demon has been purged. Even if it survived that mental attack, it would be living the rest of its pitiful days as a vegetable. He turned his back, preparing to leave before an utter feeling of utmost terror swept over his entire body. He took a look behind him and immediately regretted it. The once frail and motionless boy was now radiating a power that he had no wish to see again. He had once seen the terrible power that the Kyuubi no Yaokai had possessed, and he could see it within the demon vessel now. The demon-possessed boy looked up, sullen blue eyes traded for a pair of angry amber which were now staring straight at him. Slowly, a red chakra began to envelop the boy, and soon, thick ethereal tendrils of crimson began to surround the room. And then it all disappeared in a shockwave of anger and terror that the shinobi was sure that everyone within a 50-kilometer radius had surely felt. Even from here, he could hear the cries and wails of terror from the neighbors next door. A sudden chill shook him to the core. The jutsu should have rendered the blasted demon spawn mindless, not awaken it. So occupied with his fear, the shinobi failed to realize that the boy had stood up. Pathetic human. Instead of the soft and high-pitched voice of a child, he heard an unnatural and almost guttural voice, one that promised pain and death to whoever crosses its path. What? The child no, Kyuubi, had startled him. The jutsu should have rendered the blasted demon spawn mindless, not awaken it. As if the demon could read minds, it spoke once more. You have destroyed his mind, and in that, you have freed me momentarily. For that, you have my gratitude. However, you have harmed my vessel, and by extension, you have harmed me. And I do not spare those who wish to do me harm. Before he could even register the words, the boy disappeared from view. It happened so fast that the shinobi did not realize that his body was torn asunder and that he was already dead. Knowing that the one who had hurt his vessel has been killed, the Kyuubi returned back into its prison willingly before the seals reacted to the Yaokai's presence. Amber eyes slowly shifted back into lifeless blue. The boy stood there, standing in the warm entrails of the one he had killed, for as long as his legs could support him. It would take another 10 minutes before the ANBU finally came and took the boy away. Never did he think that he would have to come here again. It was 4 meters wide and 4 meters across, and the walls were painted a bright white, reinforced with numerous chakra seals and containment wards. It looked just like any other cell which could be found in the underground ANBU facility, and one might not know that it was here where Orochimaru was held for a week or two before his grisly experiments had been found out. Such a simple-looking cell to hold one of the most notorious of missing nins in history. But that had been a long time ago, and Sarutobi tried to suppress his disappointment, shame and anger when he thought of his once quiet prodigy. But now, a new tenant had taken the place of his old student, one that far surpassed his genius student in terms of notoriety. Ironically, it was hard to believe that he was only 5 years old. Before long, he stopped at the large and imposing metal door at the far end of the corridor, the pathway behind him sealed by an identical door of iron. Briefly, he looked at the two ANBU who were his guards for another one of his untimely visits, and he was not surprised to find that he could not discern anything from their body language. With his pipe in hand, he waved off his escort detail, who immediately stepped back as door to the cell parted to reveal the sole occupant within. He was a small thing, with a messy blonde crop that was his hair. His cheeks were whiskered, like a feline, a gift from his tenant most likely. However, his hands were bound by a straitjacket, their purpose not to prevent harm to its wearer but rather protect the medic nins who came regular to feed the boy. But the most remarkable of his features were his eyes, which were constantly shifting from sapphire blue to angry crimson, but no matter what color they were, they had always possessed that unfocused glint which told the world that he wasn't there. It had been 6 months ago since the attack on Uzumaki Naruto, which had left 2 innocents and a revenge-stricken shinobi dead and his mind shattered. The council decided it was for the village's benefit and not young Naruto's, for him to be locked away from the populace, in fear that he would become berserk. Sarutobi found it quite cruel to hold a child in solitude for such a long time, but his duty always came first before his humanity. and Naruto was unfortunately a victim of circumstance. Naruto-kun, the third Hokage of the Leaf, said, "How are you feeling today?" Naruto didn't respond, nor did he take any notice to his visitors, simply opting to stare at the white bleached walls of his prison for as long as it took. Sarutobi sighed. It had been always like this for the past half a year. Sarutobi would ask a load of questions while young Naruto simply sat uninterested and seemingly trapped within his whole world. He wanted to help the boy, but it was up to Naruto to decide whether or not he wanted that help. Slowly, the boy turned his head to face the man. His eyes were as blank as the whites of the wall, but Sarutobi could see a glimmer of recognition within those dead eyes. It was rare when Naruto moved on his own will, and it was even rarer when he looked at you at all. And Sarutobi intended to make as much progress as he could with the demon vessel. "Fine. That's good to hear, Naruto-kun." He would have sentenced the fool that caused the boy to be in this state to death, if he wasn't already dead at the hands of young Uzumaki. The medic nins had no explanation as to why Naruto had become dead to the world. They said that it may be due to the trauma he had experienced, and that it would help if someone would talk to him once in a while. Knowing that many of his shinobi would rather die than do it, he took it upon himself to visit whenever he had free time to spare. "You have come here for a reason. What is it?" The boy rasped lightly, his voice hoarse from disuse. Sarutobi was surprised before he brightened a bit. The boy was cunningly sharp. "How would you like it if you could get out of here?" Naruto looked puzzled at the question. "Out of here?" he asked in return, trying to understand the concept of another world than the one he was currently trapped in. "Yes," the Hokage nodded. "Fresh air, sunlight, freedom, and people." Naruto shook his head. "No, why?" Sapphire eyes stared at him. "People hurt me the last time. But you don't know that it would happen again," he pointed out, gesturing to the cell. "Surely you want freedom from this place." Naruto stared blankly at the man. "No, people will hurt me again." The boy's head shifted away, a move which Sarutobi recognized as dismissal from the part of Naruto. Sarutobi frowned. Even though Naruto's brain functions had been severely limited, he was not in the least dumb. It had been an improvement from the time when they first brought him in, and it is all the more that convinced him to force, if necessary, Naruto back into the world. He was also sure that the Kyuubi played no small part in the repairing of Naruto's damaged psyche, but it seemed that the damage done was not as reversible as he thought. Still, it was better than nothing. Mind jutsu were terribly tricky to heal. "Naruto," he bent down to meet the boy on his level. "They will not hurt you again, I promise." Pure blue eyes turned to regard him, the cog of the mind of a 5-year-old turning ever slowly to process his words. He was telling the truth, for the record. He had made sure that nobody who knew his secret could harm the boy. There was a sudden flash of crimson that Sarutobi knew was not natural, a cunning intelligence that was lurking behind those childlike eyes, trying to discern whether or not he was telling the truth. It was disturbing, to say the least. Then, almost as fast as it came, the light vanished and the boy was fully Naruto again. "Promise?" he asked, and Sarutobi noticed that he sounded just like any other child when they were insecure about something. Sarutobi took a good look at him. There was no emotion in his eyes, no malice, no expectations, just sparkling curiosity. "Yes, I promise." Silence reigned as the first-year academy students sat very, very still. It was hard to believe that just seconds ago they were acting their age, which namely consisted of crying, screaming, making an indecent amount of noise, and repeating them until they either ran out of energy or until an adult came to control them. Of course, they were aged 5.5 and had enough energy to make a Chunin tired if not carefully monitored. Not to mention, it would take an especially skilled adult to make them compile with his demands. And Yumino Uruka was that person. He stood in front of his appointed class, his face stern as if daring anyone to even make a peep. Deciding that he had the brat's attention, he spoke. "Welcome to the Ninja Academy. I'm Uruka-sensei, or just plain sensei if you wish. For the next 6 years or so, you will be learning the basics of being a ninja, and I will be here to teach you whatever you may need as you take your first steps towards the life of a shinobi." There was a chorus of "Hi, Uruka-sensei." Satisfied, he was about to roll call when a knock came from the door before it opened to reveal someone Uruka did not expect to see. The stern expression melted into a frantic one as he recognized the person at the door. "H. Hokage-sama, I just came by to deliver a new student. You wouldn't mind, would you?" It wasn't uncommon for the man to bring wayward students back into the classroom, though it was a surprise in itself as the Hokage was normally busy. That being said, Uruka had noticed a small child clutching the hand of the Hokage. His hair was blonde and looked strangely familiar, though Uruka could not remember where he had seen the boy. But before he could try to recall, he remembered that the Hokage was still awaiting his response. "Oh, of course not. There is enough space in the class," he exclaimed, feeling very flustered indeed. Still smiling, the old man, otherwise known as the most powerful ninja in the village, gently ushered in the boy. The boy didn't relent on his grip and instead held it harder, for the Hokage winced a bit before bending down to whisper something into the boy's ear. Almost immediately, he had let go and hopped towards the empty seat that Hokage pointed to. Strange child, that one was. Uruka picked up his attendance sheet and found that the Hokage had not given the name of the boy before he had left. "What is your name?" Uruka asked, pointing to the blonde in question. The boy was quiet for a moment, as if thinking of an appropriate answer to his question. "Me?" the boy asked in return, his voice subdued and his face puzzled. He seemed to have trouble remembering as his cherub-like features arched into a frown. Uruka was beginning to find him quite strange indeed. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "I'm Naruto, or that's what everyone seems to call me." Uruka blinked. Then he saw the whisker marks on each side of his cheek and froze. The boy was the vessel for the Kyuubi no Yakai. Haruno Sakura was a quiet child with bubblegum-colored hair and sparkling emerald eyes. Dressed in that overly cute and adorable red dress of hers that screamed cuteness, she was often the epitome of what parents called the perfect child. Quiet, obedient, and refined. And that was what she was, Little Miss Perfect. It also didn't sully the fact that she was also one of the top Kyuniachi of the year at the Genin Academy. Yes, perfect child indeed. However, contrary to popular belief, she wasn't perfect. She too could hold grudges and prejudices just as well, if not more, all because she was the victim of various scathing remarks for being such a perfect child. So yes, the truth is that Haruno Sakura was like the others. Imperfect. Like the others, she had developed a certain degree of caution towards one Uzumaki Naruto, class recluse and dropout. There were many rumors about the boy among the students, ranging from the possibly true story of how his whisker marks were a punishment from the adults for doing something so horrible that none even spoke about it, to the one that said he had been retained at the Genin Academy for as long as anyone remembered. Now, that had to be a lie. Naruto was the same age as them. Sakura would have snorted, if it weren't for the fact that snorting would be extremely unladylike, which was definitely a no-no if she wished for Sasuke-kun to like her. Haruno Sakura. She was shaken from her thoughts as her name was called out. Daintily, she walked up in front of the Mizuki-sensei and Uruka-sensei who sat behind grating panel upon which held the shiny headbands that signified one as a ninja of the leaf. "Begin at your discretion, if you please," Uruka-sensei said. Sakura focused her thoughts for a moment, before forming the first and only seal of the Bunshin no Jutsu. A poof of smoke later revealed 3 perfect replicas of herself. "Good, you passed." Another poof of smoke later revealed a triumphant Sakura who eagerly accepted the Hidayate that was handed to her. Within a moment, she retreated back to the line which formed at the side of the class. Uzumaki Naruto. Her thoughts were not out of pity, however, as she watched the boy in question perform. It didn't take a genius to figure out what would happen next. As always, Naruto will fail. Uruka sighed as he watched Naruto stumble on the simplest of academy-taught jutsu. Every one of his students had been able to at least to create a simple clone of themselves, but Naruto had been the odd exception. Instead of a trio of clones, all Naruto managed to do was create a clone whose features were so horribly distorted that even the most oblivious of people could tell the difference. Even then, the jutsu lasted only a sparse second or so before being dispelled, and that was definitely not what counted as a passable effort. He watched as the boy tried to force more chakra into the jutsu, the azure life energy burning his flesh as it escaped through the pores of his skin. Uruka bit back a sigh, while he acknowledged that Naruto's efforts were commendable. It just wasn't enough to pass the graduation exam. Before Naruto could further burn out his chakra system, Uruka called out for him to stop. "Naruto, that would be enough. Take your place in the queue." At this, snickers emerged from the line of students that formed at the side of the classroom. The blond boy ignored them and took his place among them, his face impassive through it all, though Uruka noticed a small crack at the stony facade in the most untalented one of his students. In all the 7 years that he had taught Naruto, he had never seen the boy smile, cry, or do anything expressive that was connected with childhood. And in that, he had learned to read Naruto through his body language, but even that proved somewhat ineffective should Naruto wish not to be read. Perhaps he should pass. Uruka-sensei, Mizuki, who sat on his left, commented. After all, he did manage to conjure a clone which was somewhat. "No," he said rather firmly, "the rest of the class managed it well enough, and it wouldn't be fair if we should let him pass just out of pity." The words were loud enough to be heard by everyone and he flinched slightly. Despite the fact that the boy was the vessel for the demon, Uruka regretted those words no matter how much truth it held. Some things were just better left unsaid. Tentatively, he took a small glance at the boy. Naruto noticed this and his features became even more impassive, if that was even possible at all. He sat on the rooftop of one of the nearby buildings near the academy, idly dangling his legs over the ledge with little regard for safety. He was more concerned with the recent turn of events than anything else actually. He had failed the Genin exam. Again, 7th time, if he bothered to think about it. It wasn't fair, he decided. After all, he did what the examiners had told him to do, change into someone that he wasn't. And he remembered the entire curriculum to the very letter. Were they not satisfied with his effort? And why were they not in the first place? He was puzzled, the answers not coming to him as they would have at any other time. He had spent the better part of the last 7 years doing what was required of him at the academy, and all of it would become wasted effort if this kept up. And if there was one thing that Uzumaki Naruto didn't like, it was not knowing answers. "Oi, Naruto-kun," a voice called out to him. Mizuki-sensei, Naruto recognized at once. He turned to see the Chunin grinning at him. Naruto creased a frown. There was something about Mizuki-sensei that always managed to irk him. It didn't help that the man was constantly smiling a grin or two every time. Naruto had learnt the hard way that smiles were often only skin deep. The voice growled its discontent at the man. Naruto blinked. It was quite seldom for the voice to speak to him, if not at all, and he welcomed it whenever it voiced its presence in his head. The voice had always been with him, and for as long as he could remember, it had protected him. I would not trust that smelly excuse of a human if I were you. Almost instinctively, he asked the voice in his head why. It didn't answer, however, and he prepared to ask once again when someone called out his name. Naruto-kun. He frowned. Didn't they know that he was talking to the voice? Is there anything the matter, Mizuki-sensei? He asked in a subdued voice, though he was also curious as to what the Chunin had to say. Mizuki took the opportunity to look sheepish. Sorry about not passing you. Don't pay Iruka-sensei any mind, Naruto-kun, he was just being stiff, he said, ruffling the boy's already messy blonde hair. He frowned. He didn't like people touching him. It had reminded him of forgotten things which best stayed forgotten. I would appreciate it if you stopped touching me, Naruto said immediately, before pausing to add, Mizuki-sensei. Within that brief moment, he caught something out of place within the cheery Chunin's eye, a gleam that was familiar and yet foreign to him. However, it passed quickly and the bright-eyed Chunin teacher removed the offending hand away from Naruto. Of course, Naruto-kun, Mizuki said, settling his hands into the pockets of his pants. Say, would you like another try at passing the genin exam? Naruto snapped his head up instantly, eyes filled with curiosity and attentiveness. Mizuki smiled, a dark glint appearing in his eyes. Dusk had fallen over the hidden village of Konoha, and its inhabitants were already tucked into their warm beds dreaming of what the future may bring to them. However, there was one who was still awake at this time of the night. Now where was the Hokage's house again? He spotted a particular house which stood out from the rest, with its overly circular shape and bright red fire kanji painted across it. Instead of sneaking in, he settled himself on the roof, his hands languidly forming a long set of seals. Completing the last of the seals, he placed his hands onto tiles and poof. A small little fox poofed into existence, its three tails coiled sinuously around itself. It was clearly enjoying its sleep. That is, until Naruto prodded a finger at its soft furry underbelly. It jerked up from its sleep, yipping at the sudden unpleasant prod before looking around for the culprit. It caught sight of Naruto and growled, before yawning. The little fox rubbed its face tiredly with its small paws before it looked up regarding the boy who summoned it with eyes that said, give me one reason why I shouldn't nibble your pinky to hell. If Naruto was fazed, he didn't show it. I need your help in getting something. Amber eyes glared at azure ones. He understood what the kit wanted to say to. Hell no, I need my beauty sleep, you stupid human. Which was pretty much what the fox was telling with its very expressive eyes right now. I will get you some fresh meat the next time I summon you. Almost instantly, the little kitsune looked up at the boy, golden eyes wide with anticipation, complete with fluffy tails swishing around cutely. He let a small smile play over his lips. Little kitsune were easy to control if you knew what they liked. This one was his favorite in particular. It wasn't as snappish like the rest of its kin, and it was also quite receptive towards him. The voice had taught him this jutsu when he was feeling lonely playing with himself, with an explicit warning to never show anyone that trick for as long as he lived. He had asked why though, but he never did get a straight answer from the voice, which irked him to no end. Pushing his thoughts aside, Naruto looked at the fox. So, little one, do you know what to do? The kitsune bobbed its head in confirmation before disappearing in a flash of smoke. Clanged. Sarutobi frowned, putting away his scroll until a later time. For now, he had to investigate where the noise had come from. It wouldn't do for the Hokage of the Leaf to be caught unawares by an intruder. Taking a turn from the corridor to the scroll room, he saw a brief flash of a crimson tail before it disappeared into the door. A kitsune, he thought. If anything, his interest had been piqued. There was nothing of value in that room, save for the scroll of seals. Eye widening, Sarutobi rushed towards the room, to find it not only empty of any persons but also bereft of large scroll which contained almost, if not all, of Konoha's kenjutsu. There was only one who he knew had a contract with Kitsune, and things did not look good for young Naruto. Somewhere in the woodlands inside of the village, two silhouettes were highlighted by the pristine light of the moon high above. One belonged to a fox while the other, a small human boy. If there were any to witness the scene, they would have found it strange, for no foxes were ever seen willingly with a human. This one seemed to be an exception to the rule, however. The kitsune preened, throwing a diminutive paw over its prize as it looked at the human with what seemed like smugness in its eyes. Thank you, little kitsune, I will be sure to get you your treat next time, he said softly, scratching the back of the fox's ear gently. The fox acquiesced and yipped playfully in response before vanishing in a thick puff of smoke, leaving the large scroll against the tree trunk. Naruto opened the large scroll, his eager eyes scanning its contents. Let's see, the first jutsu is Kage Bunshin. It seemed simple enough, being a variation of the Bunshin no Jutsu, and all it needed was just a little more chakra than normal. A moment later, he was staring at a perfect replica of himself, and he felt a tug of satisfaction when the clone didn't disappear soon after. He dismissed the clone, before turning his attention back to the scroll. Let's see, the next skill is. Looking into his crystal ball, Sarutobi, third Hokage of Konoha, could not help but feel worried. While the active ninjas who have responded to his call were adequately skilled for the task, he was more concerned about Naruto. How the boy managed to learn of the Scroll of Seals was a complete mystery to him. Most would believe the boy to be a complete failure, though many do not know that he has been mentally crippled. Even then, he was more perspective than those at his age, and had an almost insatiable thirst for knowledge. But that was not all that Naruto possessed. He also had a keen understanding of anything jutsu-related and had a memory unlike any other he had seen before. Naruto had the ability to memorize virtually anything, be it the entire inventory of a grocery store to the amount of people that passes him by every day. Or in this case, hand seals. The only reason why he failed the Genin exam so many times was because he had memorized a set of seals belonging to the Bunshin no Jutsu which had been shown incorrectly. Hence Naruto's failure to conjure anything which could qualify as a proper Bunshin. If there had been a system where learning was aided by manuals, he believed that Naruto could have graduated earlier on as a prodigy. Shinobi did not have manuals for jutsu, often teaching the new generation by word of mouth, which was far better than having physical instructions for ninjutsu because of numerous reasons, namely the stealing of a village's secrets by outsiders. What manuals or scrolls that existed usually contained jutsu which were often highly prized or forbidden in nature and were kept from public knowledge. But alas, there wasn't such a system in the whole of the continent, lest village secrets be far more easily to be stolen or copied by undesirables. Naruto hadn't been able to obtain a set of clear instructions to learn from, and for that it resulted in ridicule and scorn from everybody. That is, until now. And the scroll of seals was as potent as you can get in the area of Kenjutsu. Many of the techniques sealed within it were either offensive in nature or demanded some sort of sacrifice to be used. Among those sealed within that scroll was the Shikifunen technique the fourth had used to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto. It was also one of the last techniques to be listed in that scroll, and for that, Sarutobi was thankful. Watching Naruto practically breeze past the application of the shadow clone technique at a frightening pace, he prayed that they found him before anything untoward happened. He was dirty, he was tired, but he was almost at the end of the scroll. The Cage Bunshin had been the easiest to perform, after all. Most of the others' techniques within the scroll had been quite challenging to perform, most either requiring more time for him to grasp its concept or had a particularly heavy drain on chakra to use. And sometimes, they were both, forcing him to exercise more patience than he would have liked. In the end, however, he managed to master them all with confidence that he could use them in the future should it be called for. There was one last jutsu that was left, one more to be learnt before he could become a genin. As his fingers were just about to unravel the next section which contained the last jutsu, a voice called out to him. One that he recognized instantly as Iruka-sensei. Gingerly, he rolled up the scroll, before fastening it to his back as he waited patiently for his teacher to approach him. Naruto, the Chunin shouted again as he spotted the blonde hunched over the scroll of seals. What in the gods possessed you to steal the scroll of seals from the Hokage-sama? You do know how much trouble you are in now. Naruto looked confused. Mizuki-sensei said that if I performed all of these jutsu in there, at this, he pointed to the large scroll on his back, I would be able to become a genin. Mizuki did. Iruka stuttered, putting the two together. His stomach churned. Mizuki was after the scroll himself. This was bad. He had to hide Naruto, along with the scroll quickly. If he knew that Naruto was here. Whoosh! Kunai whizzed past him, managing to pin him onto a nearby tree. As if on cue, a deep voice echoed throughout the surrounding woodland. Well, if it isn't Iruka. Iruka froze. Oi, brat, Mizuki called out to Naruto, pass me the scroll. Why should I? Iruka heard the boy ask in response. Mizuki curled up his mouth in disgust. Because there's no point in you having it, I guess I will have to tell you the truth. He unfroze from his shock. No, Iruka yelled. He's not supposed to know. If it was possible, Mizuki's face turned even more gleeful than it already was. Don't you know, Naruto-kun? Mizuki asked mockingly. You're the demon which killed Iruka's parents, Kyuubi no Yakai. Demon? He frowned at Mizuki's words. He did not know of any demon that existed within him. And if it did, he would be the first to know. Right? He yelled within the confines of his mind, hoping for the voice to appear once again. What is it, boy? Is there a demon within me? At this, the voice chuckled, and Naruto became confused. Why are you laughing? The voice ignored him. What is its name? Kyuubi no Yakai. Naruto responded honestly. The voice chuckled louder, before speaking. Boy, I will tell you something. I quotem the Kyuubi. The voice was the Kyuubi. Somehow, Naruto could not associate the voice with the rampageous demon that was the Kyuubi, and for good reason. The voice helped him when nobody else would have, answered when others ignored him. How could the voice which he had known for as long as he could be? A demon, an entity of destruction and chaos when it did otherwise. I do not understand. He voiced out his thoughts. The voice, or rather Kyuubi, frowned, though he felt rather than saw it. Kit, you almost always don't understand. But before he could ask another question, a shout of pain reminded him of the real world. He looked up and saw Iruka hovering over him, his Chunin jacket stained with dark motley spots of blood. Tears were streaking down his face as Iruka struggled to speak. Naruto, you must have been in a lot of pain too. The scene was disturbingly familiar, with blood, pain, and death as its centerpiece. There was a flash and he remembered. The screaming, the searing heat within his head and the pain, lots of pain. The memories were pounding his mind after so much time of repression. Stifling back a cry, Naruto looked up, past Iruka's large frame, to see Mizuki preparing another attack, one that would make sure that Iruka would become as still as his foster parents had become. Naruto abhorred violence, hated how people liked to pick on others less fortunate than themselves. Though he didn't like to be the one who threw the first punch, neither would he just take it, especially not from those who had every intention to cause pain. It was a split-second decision that he had to make, and he chose. The last time someone tried to harm him, he was unprepared. This time, however, it will be different. Forming his hands into a familiar seal, he murmured softly, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The battle was over before it even started. Mizuki now lay half dead and unconscious from the punches the multiple shadow clones had given him. All the while, Haruka sat speechless. How is it possible for a boy who can't even get a simple Bunshin corporeal manage to perfect, much less perform, a highly advanced variation of it? It was surreal. "Naruto, I think you overdid it." Haruka managed to gasp out, the wound in his back forcing him to wince. The boy tilted his head, eyes holding genuine puzzlement and innocence. "He was going to hurt you," and he said it with such conviction that Haruka could not muster up any blame for the boy. Whatever doubts that Haruka had about Naruto vanished almost completely. There was no way Naruto could be the Kyuubi, not after what was said and done. But still, he shouldn't do that. He winced, the pain which had been forgotten a moment ago coming back at full force. Naruto looked at Haruka and said, "Turn over." Haruka blinked. What? The whisker-marked boy frowned. "I know some medical jutsu, and it would be best if I could see the wound to treat it." Haruka gave the boy a wary look, and rightly so. Academy students don't just know medical ninjutsu out of the blue. As if sensing his question, Naruto quickly supplied an answer. "I learned it from the scroll." There was something about his tone that told Haruka that Naruto was hiding something, but he would accept it for now. "I see." If Naruto's flawless execution of the Kage Bunshin was anything to go by, he was sure that it would be all right. Or he hoped so. Naruto nodded, before turning his attention to the wound. Silence reigned as the boy worked on his back, with the occasional hum of energy to disturb the stillness. The pain faded until it was nothing but a prick in the back of his mind. "I'm finished," Naruto announced, and Haruka turned back just in time to see the boy's glowing hands revert back to normal. "So?" Haruka blinked. "Yes." Blue eyes looked at him expectantly. "Do I pass?" Haruka blinked, before letting out a throaty laugh, which made the pain come back, though he couldn't care less right now. Trust Naruto to say the most strangest of things in the most inappropriate of times. Wordlessly, he untied his own hidaite and pressed it into Naruto's hands. He finally acknowledged Naruto as one of his beloved students. "Yes, Naruto," he said, a smile on his face. "You passed." Blah denotes speech. Blah denotes sound. Blah denotes thoughts. Blah denotes demon talking. Sarutobi brought young Naruto out for ramen, his treat of course. He had discovered early on that the boy had one thing that remained constant in his life, and that was his love for ramen. Sarutobi had once tried to introduce healthier foods to the boy, but Naruto was adamant that ramen was still the best and healthiest food of them all. Suffice to say, the third Hokage of the leaf found, to his horror, that his taste in food had gradually become inclined to miso-flavored ramen despite what the medic nins had to say about a balanced diet. Still, he regularly invited Naruto for ramen, despite the protests from his doctors. His treat still, of course. But this little trip to Ikikaru was not purely pleasure only. Naruto was on his fifth bowl when he asked the question. "Naruto," Sarutobi said suddenly, gaining the boy's attention. "Did you learn every technique in the scroll?" "No." The boy shook his head. "I got to the second last one before Haruka-sensei found me." "Naruto, those jutsu you learned," the Hokage's voice turned grave, "promise me that you will never use them unless you're in an emergency, and even then, exercise restraint when using them." Naruto gave the Sandaime his usual look of puzzlement, failing to comprehend his situation. "Why, those jutsu only cause pain to others, and I would not wish to see it be used for anything other than protecting the ones that are precious to you." He had learned a bit of Naruto's complex for protecting people during these ramen excursions, as he liked to call them, and he was glad to know that the boy was thoughtful enough to give people who were strangers the benefit of doubt, even though the environment he had grew up in was less than amicable to him. It made it much easier to prevent Naruto from doing anything he would later regret. "Can I use the Kage Bunshin then?" the boy asked almost immediately, and Sarutobi pondered for a moment. While the Kage Bunshin was a jounin technique, nothing prevented lower-ranked shinobi from using it, save for the prohibitive chakra requirements. Besides, it was one of the few techniques in the scroll that did not cause destruction on a large scale, and Sarutobi was willing to relax the rules in this case. "Yes, you may," he answered, "though I suggest you keep that fact to yourself." "What about the healing jutsu?" "It helped Haruka-sensei. I don't see how it hurts other people." "Ah," Sarutobi said a bit more cheerfully, breaking the growing gloom in the atmosphere, "you can use it, though I suggest you use it sparingly like the rest. You felt a terrible strain when you used it, did you not?" The only non-offensive jutsu was the Scroll of Seals had been a high-level medical jutsu created by his now wayward student, Tsunade. It was capable of healing the most grievous of wounds, though it demanded a great deal of chakra from the user, an amount that very few had the capability to give. It had been labeled a kenjutsu when it took the life of the fifth medic nin who tried to use it. Naruto nodded at this before turning his attention to the sinfully delicious noodles. "Wait," he cried out suddenly, surprising both cook and himself, "that means that I have no jutsu to use." Sarutobi sighed, reaching into his robes to pull out a bundled scroll. I have already thought about that, so I have written for you an instruction manual of basic genin techniques that you should already know. Burn it once you finish memorizing them. The boy accepted it before tucking it into one of his pockets. He paused for a moment, taking the time to slur up his noodles. I promise you that I wouldn't use those jutsu freely, but on one condition. What is it then? There was a large and rare smile on the boy's lips. I want another 5 bowls of ramen. Sarutobi held back a groan. Sometimes he forgot how much Naruto could eat ramen when he wanted to. Nara Shikamaru was bored out of his mind as he waited for Iruka-sensei to come in. Since today was the day where the genins were to be assigned into their teams, they were allowed to come later as both the teachers and their prospective jounin senseis to be were preparing the team assignments. I should have flunked the exam like Naruto, he thought. That way he wouldn't have to put up with his mother's incessant nagging for him to wake up every freaking morning. The boy in question was not present, which was natural considering that he failed the test. A pity really, he was hoping that Naruto would be placed on the same team as he was, along with Choji. After all, he preferred to have his shogi partner nearby when he wanted to play his favorite game. Deciding not to waste precious time thinking, Shikamaru opted to drop his head into his arms for a quick nap. After a minute or so, there was a loud gasp of surprise and he woke up. He saw someone take the free seat next to him, wearing heinously bright orange. Hey, Naruto? Shikamaru squinted, his vision blurry. There was something different about this Naruto. Oh, he had a hit I-8, he realized at last. Normally, Shikamaru did not ask questions that he already knew the answers to, but he wanted to make sure the boy in front of him wasn't a hallucination. So you passed? Yeah. Looking around, he saw a lot of his classmates sharing the same incredulous looks as they stared at Naruto. He would be doing the same too if it wasn't so damn troublesome. So same time, same place today? The boy asked, and Shikamaru turned his attention back onto him once more. Yeah, and bring a few cups of ramen for me and Choji. I got a feeling that the game is going to take quite a while, he uttered back lazily. It had been quite a while since their last epic match, and he had a feeling that this match would probably be the only one he would be playing for a long while because of new ninja responsibilities. God, how he hated that word. Naruto nodded silently, just as Iruka-sensei walked into the room. Okay, everyone, listen up, the man yelled, ceasing all conversations between the students. I will now begin to read out your team assignments. Your jounin sensei will be coming to pick you all up soon. Team 1. This continued for several minutes, and soon the class population dwindled down to a few, the rest having been picked up by their respective jounin sensei. Those who were still in the room were Naruto, Shikamaru, Ino, Sakura, Choji, and Sasuke. The pineapple-haired boy was fervently hoping that Ino wasn't going to be on his team. She had nagged and grumbled about him almost as much as his mother had done. But of course, calling upon miracles wasn't his specialty. Next, Nara Shikamaru, Akamitsu Choji, and Yamanaka Ino. Shikamaru groaned, slapping a palm to his forehead. He turned to Ino, who was shocked. She noticed his gaze and gave a look which demanded total obedience from him, or else there would be hell to pay, especially on his part. He had known that Ino was pinning after the Uchiha and was utterly upset that she was paired up with her childhood friends. Not that the status mattered much, he dryly noted, seeing that Ino was perfectly fine with using extreme methods to get things the way she wants. Especially with her so-called friends. Maybe I should have failed that test, Shikamaru thought, eyeing the glaring girl nervously. Girls can be so troublesome. They waited for half an hour, 2 hours, and then Iruka-sensei had to go back to do some paperwork which was due in by the evening. Finally, the clock hand turned. Dinged. As it now stands, they had waited for 3 hours, a new record in tardiness for the new and apparently anonymous jounin sensei. Suffice to say, Uchiha Sasuke was not amused. After seeing that his teammates consisted of a dead last dropout who, by some form of divine intervention, managed to pass and a seriously annoying Kunoichi who kept gushing over him, Sasuke had serious doubts to their abilities. Letting himself be objective once more, he tried to find at least some redeemable qualities in the pink-haired girl. After another minute of silent stares from her part, Sasuke gave up trying. But unlike the shallow perception he had on Haruno, he found Uzumaki to be quite a strange one. Ever since his first days in the academy, he had seen Naruto be a recluse, a lone wolf, just like himself. But that was where the similarities between them ended. Sasuke had been the top student in the class whereas Naruto was dead last. Academically, he scored quite high for the written exams, but his success failed to be carried over into the practical side of things. Other than the abnormally large amount of chakra that the boy possessed, Sasuke could not see anything noteworthy about him that could make him into an average ninja. In any case, he would have to wait and see whether these teammates of his were going to be hindrances to his goal. Sakura could not feel any better even if she tried. Sasuke-kun was on her team. The thought sent a shiver of excitement down her spine. Tentatively, she spared a glance at the brooding boy's facade and almost squealed. Sasuke-kun is so cool, she thought, as she began staring at her Sasuke-kun once more. Hell yeah, Inner Sakura added her opinion. She was, however, quite put off that their jounin sensei has yet to show up. What kind of teacher would willingly let their students wait for an ungodly amount of time before showing up, if not at all? A lousy one if this was anything to go by. Forgetting about her precious Sasuke-kun for a moment, her thoughts turned to the other member of their team, and she was a bit puzzled. From what she had seen yesterday, Naruto was not able to pass the standardized test. And if so, why was he allowed to graduate? It irked her to no end that there was another person paired with her, but she dare not voice her opinion to the quiet and mysterious boy. Even though he had been the ridicule of the whole class, many had done so out of apprehension of the boy, and they had found it easier to use laughter to deal with that unnatural fear. And they found many things unsettling about him. For one, Naruto had a stare which left many on the receiving end feeling as if they were exposed for the whole world to see. She too received one of his stares, and it unnerved her greatly. He was also very silent in class. Often the only people he spoke to on a regular basis were Shikamaru and Choji, and even that was rare. But what was most disturbing about him was that look of impassiveness he always had, never changing and always there, looking as if nothing truly mattered. In truth to be told, like the rest of her former classmates, she was afraid of Naruto. Not that she will ever admit it. Naruto frowned. It had been 3 hours since the last batch of students have left, leaving him along with his new teammates. He was never particularly close to his classmates though, barring Shikamaru and Choji, both of whom were cloud-watching companions and the occasional shogi partner. To start it off simply, he knew that Sakura had graduated with top honors as the best kunoichi. He also knew that Sasuke had come in first with the highest marks in the whole class, whereas he scored the lowest, a contrast between the two. He was not bothered by it, however. Like many other things in his life, he accepted it and tried to make do in best way he could. Unlike the rest of his fellow ninjas, Naruto did not wish to strive for greatness. And for a long time, he only wished to experience what it was like to be in the outside world after experiencing the dull monotony in his cell back in the deep corners of the ANBU. Kyuubi had resented being trapped in that cell and explicitly forbade him from ever entering there again. He had read up on the history of the demon which was sealed within him, often sneaking into the public library to read, but it did not explain its desire for freedom. It had once told him that it was a kitsune, and he made use of this knowledge as he researched it. It was then he realized that freedom was essential to them, and they hated cages simply because it takes away freedom of choice. He wondered whether the Kyuubi hated him, as he was a cage to bind him after all. As if on cue, the demon in question spoke out. "You are very patient for one your age." Naruto blinked, before frowning. "Am I not? Compared to you, the rest of your kind are like over-eager mud rats." At this, Naruto could have sworn that the Kyuubi was smirking, and decided it was as good a time as any to ask his question. "Kyuubi ... you do hate me for holding you." He found the name foreign and unfitting for the presence which had been unnamed for so long within his mind. It gave a sense of realization that the voice was not just a part of him but rather something that he would never understand. And he was afraid of what he could not understand. The demon didn't answer, and it was at that moment the door to the classroom opened and a gray-haired head popped in. His face was concealed by a face mask while his hidaite covered his left eye. "Are you guys my new students?" he said with a hint of good cheer. Naruto suspected that this wouldn't be the last time the man would be late. Naruto stared at him along with Sasuke and Sakura. Their faces were much less calmer than his. Sakura had a severe glare directed at the masked man who was now apparently their sensei, and though Sasuke was a little less obvious in showing his discontentment, but anyone with half a brain could tell from his stare. It seemed that patience was not their strong suit, he noted. Their still unnamed teacher sweat dropped. "Perhaps we should go to the roof." Kakashi watched as his new team made themselves comfortable. He took this opportunity to evaluate them. "Let's see ... with the silent type. Brooding boy and the fangirl. Cherry pink this time. Wow, I always get the weird ones, huh?" Finished with his half-hearted examination, he cleared his throat before beginning to speak. "Anyway, the name's Haddock Kakashi. I have no desire whatsoever to tell you guys what I like or dislike. My dreams for future. I can't really tell you guys, but what you can know is that I have many hobbies." He ignored the looks of disbelief and irritation at his blatant attempt at secrecy. If they wished to know more about him, they should work for it, not wait for it to be handed on a silver platter. Taking advantage of their shock, he started. "You there. Name, hobbies, likes, dislikes, dreams for the future. Whatever." He pointed Sakura, who was startled out of her staring. Narrowing his only visible eye slightly, he noted that the girl at this age was probably more concerned about love than the practical stuff that compasses a ninja's life. He shrugged. "That would have to change if they pass his little test. That is, well, I'm Haruno Sakura and my dream is..." She broke off, her eyes averting from the ground to the oblivious raven-haired boy who sat nearby. The girl did the same thing with every sub-catalog he had given except for the dislikes part. She was blushing quite badly by the end of it. Is she actually serious about becoming a shinobi? Kakashi set his lips into a grimace, though it wasn't visible to them, one of the advantages of a face mask, he supposed. "Okay, what about you, the one on the left?" He pointed to the raven-haired boy who Sakura was drooling over. Kakashi noted that the boy's face was set as if permanently in a frown, which was always bad in the long run. Children were supposed to act like children and let life run its course. Not one of those grown-up children he had seen before had lasted long. "Any hobbies, likes, dislikes, or dreams?" Kakashi reckoned that the boy was going for a full frown this time, and judging from what he read up on the boy, he expected it. He wasn't disappointed, as he idly listened to the angst-ridden rant until Sasuke came onto the part he was half dreading or awaiting, depending on one's point of view. I cannot call it a dream. No, my ambition is to revive my dead clan, and, Sasuke declared, his hands folded in front of him which muffled his voice, and to kill a certain man. Kakashi didn't need to guess who the boy was referring to. He nodded faintly before turning to the last of the group. What about you? The boy stalled for a moment. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I dislike pain and suffering, and I like ramen. Kakashi waited for a moment before realizing that he was finished. He frowned. Out of all of his students, Naruto's past has been the most obscured, and there were many a discrepancy within what records that were not forbidden. And from what he could see, Naruto was someone who had plenty of hidden secrets. Well, looks like time will tell if he manages to find out any one of them. Okay, that will be all for today. Meet me tomorrow at Training Field 7 at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and don't eat breakfast either. Kakashi glanced at his watch. You will throw up. It's survival training, so bring all your tools too. Team dismissed. Your move, Shikamaru said, before taking a sip at his can of green tea. This time victory will be his. Clank. Naruto, he sighed, I really hate you. Or not. The blonde in question merely raised an eyebrow. Duly noted. They were at their cloud-gazing spot, far enough from anybody who would disturb them but close enough to go back once they're done. Relaxing, or in this case, playing. It was late in the afternoon and air was cool enough for them to play comfortably in the open. Clank. Really, sometimes I wonder how you think of all your moves, the pineapple boy said, resting his elbows on the wooden box the shogi set was on. I suspect that you've some sort of mind-reading jutsu, like Ino. Anyone could do it, he quietly said, his fingers directing another one of his pieces. All I needed to do was preempt whatever you want to start. Clank. Chaoji sat nearby, trying to make heads and tails of what is happening on the board before he gave up and began slurping up his noodles with a wet flourish. Hoping to avert the conversation from Shoji, he spoke, Nay, Naruto, how's your sensei? Clank. Naruto frowned. I'm starting to think that he has a chronic illness for tardiness. Lazy person, I gather, no offense, Shikamaru. The boy muttered something which suspiciously sounded like none taken. Clank. How's yours? Naruto asked out of politeness, eyeing Shikamaru's encroaching pieces without pause. He's okay, though Chaoji and I will have to see what he does in the future. Clank. Clank. He let a ghost of a smile grace his lips. Otsum. Checkmate. Shikamaru groaned. They arrived at the designated time the next day, to find the spot empty and missing one gray-haired Jounin sensei. Left with no choice, they waited, and waited. Naruto was silent as usual, lost in his thoughts. Sakura was trying to chat up Sasuke, though her attempts were met with almost outright refusal. She stopped trying after an hour or so and retreated to a shady spot under a nearby tree. Time passed once more and it was 10:45 when Sasuke had enough of waiting. He could spend his valuable time by training than sitting around and doing nothing at all. Vastly annoyed, he glanced at his teammates. An idea suddenly struck him. Oi, Uzumaki, Sasuke called suddenly, standing up to face the blonde. He wanted to find out how good the boy was, no matter what the scores had said. He wouldn't hurt him too bad. Sakura was just too weak for him, and besides she was a girl. Want to spar? He asked with a casual arrogance in his voice. Naruto looked a bit confused at the request, before standing up himself. Isn't it best to conserve our strength? He asked, face betraying only puzzlement. Sasuke scowled, his irritation at the current situation besting him. That man whom we call teacher, he spat out the last word with annoyance, is still not here yet. Besides, it's going to be taijutsu only. Naruto stood silent for a while before turning away from the Uchiha. I feel that fighting now is unnecessary, Uchiha-san. Sasuke felt anger at the casual brush off. Don't you dare turn your back on me. He rushed at Naruto, a fist raised to strike the boy. Naruto just sidestepped, grabbing the fist and an elbow for good measure before tossing the Uchiha at a tree. Sasuke stopped himself from crashing, landing with as much finesse as he could. He smirked. Better, Uzumaki. At this, Naruto frowned, dark eyes staring at him. I have no wish to hurt you, Naruto said quietly, his feet settling into a basic defensive taijutsu stance that was taught at the academy. Don't worry, you won't, he said before charging once more. The pair exchanged blows and counters, neither of them getting past each other's defenses. For one who's been a dead last, he's not bad. But not good enough, he thought, as he brought a fist crashing into the side of Naruto's face. Score 1 for me. It was a blink, but Sasuke thought he saw a sudden change in Naruto's eyes and froze for a moment. Did they just turn crimson? He didn't have time to think as the boy vanished from his sight for a second. There was a slight rustle from his right. There. He turned to find no one. What the? His skin tingled and he moved, barely able to dodge a blurred shape. Crack. The trunk of the tree was badly cracked, showing a fist-sized crater. Sasuke frowned. That couldn't be right. Trees in Kano were much sturdier than in most countries, and its strength was often compared to that of steel. If Naruto had this strength, why didn't he feel it in his punches? Instantly, Sasuke felt incensed and strangely gleeful. How much did Naruto hold back just now? The boy in question leapt back a good distance away, slight panting from the exertion of the fight. All the while, Sakura sat under her tree, unable to move as she watched Sasuke and Naruto fight. While she was rooting for her Sasuke-kun, she was quite worried for him as well. who knew what Naruto was capable of. Seeing Naruto fight made it even clearer for her. She also knew that trees in Konoha were as hard as they could get, and Naruto, a dead last genin, managed to make a hole in it. Naruto was dangerous like the others have said. Sasuke, however, was less observant. "Why the hell did you stop?" he shouted, wanting to defeat this new obstacle. "Sensei's here," Naruto said in that quiet tone of his, eyes now back to their normal blue lucidity. Sakura blinked before turning to look behind. True enough, Kakashi was standing there with something akin to amusement in his eye. "Yo," Kakashi waved with nonchalance. "Had fun while I was away." "You're late," Sakura yelled. In truth, she was rather relieved for him to be here. Kakashi scratched the back of his head. "Here, I was helping an old lady, you see." The stares from his 3 students already told him what they thought of his excuse. He waved them off. "Now that I'm here, I suppose that I will brief you further on what you're all supposed to do. I will be frank with you. This training is super tough," he said. Sasuke smirked while Sakura did not look convinced. Naruto just remained silent. "And now for the coup de grace. But this is no ordinary training. You will have to fight me if you wish to remain as genin. And this test has a 66% chance of failure, and those who fail will be sent back to the academy. In other words, of the 27 graduates, only 9 will become full genin." At this, both Sasuke and Sakura paled considerably. Naruto had a look of surprise which more or less satisfied Kakashi. "Not so easy now, isn't it?" he asked pleasantly. Wait a minute," Sakura burst out, her green eyes frantic. "I thought that we've already become genin." "Correction. Graduating from the academy only makes you eligible for geninship," Kakashi answered calmly. "This, however, is the real thing." He set up an alarm clock at one of the tree stumps in the clearing before he held up 2 golden bells for all to see. "You will have an hour to snatch these bells from me. The only way you guys can get them is by coming at me with killer intent, otherwise don't try it at all, and anything beyond the 1 hour will result in the loss of lunch. Lastly, the one who fails to get a bell will be tied to one of these lovely stumps. Understand?" They nodded, their bodies ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Kakashi smirked, and this time they could see it in his eyes. "Let the games begin." Kakashi watched his surroundings for any sign of movement whatsoever. It was good to know that his students were at least apt in hiding, for he could not find either head or tail of them. Or at least, not yet. He had given them a grace period of 5 minutes before he would begin his own counter-offensive. Hopefully within that time, they would realize that working together was the key to this exercise. Even if they failed to get the bells, he would pass them so long as they showed teamwork. "Well, it isn't too much to hope," he mumbled to himself before fishing out his copy of Ika Ika Paradise. It didn't take long before he was interrupted by an approaching large ball of flame. Snapping the book shut, he thought of one thing. Finally, he dodged the attack, noticing a blur coming in fast from his blind side. It could be only Sasuke, since fire jutsu were an Uchiha specialty. That, and he wasn't so sure of what Naruto was capable of. "First lesson, Taijutsu," Kakashi drawled as he countered the kick at his head, while sending a fist of his own towards the dark-haired boy. Sasuke deftly dodged it, but not before his shoulder received a glancing blow. They traded a few more blows, most of it in the favor of the Jounin, which was to be expected, before Sasuke jumped back. Not bad," Kakashi said, his fingers stroking his mask-covered chin, "though the form is a bit off." "Tiger form, is it?" Sasuke only grunted in reply, onyx eyes calculating the next course of action. His stance relaxed for a moment before his feet and arms shifted into a more esoteric position. Phoenix Rising, Kakashi realized as he recognized as the Uchiha clan's variant of Taijutsu, which he had seen in action a few times before the Uchiha massacre. Almost in a blink, Sasuke closed the distance between them, hands blazing chakra. While Sasuke had not managed to get in any hits, Kakashi noted that the strikes were becoming increasingly harder to block. The main idea behind Phoenix Rising was using chakra-enhanced speed and a great deal of individually learned taijutsu, rather than a rigid set of moves that cannot be molded to suit one's strength, which results in a greater physical flexibility. The problem, however, was that it needed the Sharingan to be of any use, and Kakashi was sure that Sasuke hadn't achieved that yet. As it was, the fast strikes were quickly intercepted by far more experienced hands, and Kakashi crinkled his eye in a smile. "Not bad, Sasuke-kun, though I think you might need the Sharingan for that." "Nay." Sasuke frowned before breaking the fist lock with a well-placed kick and renewed his offensive, his hands forming seals before he let loose a large ball of flame. Kakashi dodged, feeling the heat of the jutsu as it passed by him and into one of the larger rock formations that were littered around. But before he could continue any further, a blur shot out from one of the bushes and the area around the boy had become smoky. Probably from a smoke bomb, Kakashi thought. And when the smoke cleared, he found himself alone in the clearing, with no hint of the battle before save for the smoldering rocks behind. Kakashi grinned under his mask. He had a good feeling about this bunch. Sakura was tense by now. For almost 15 minutes, she had waited in the exact spot she had occupied when Kakashi-sensei first announced the start of the survival exercise. More importantly, she hadn't seen any hint of Sasuke-kun since they had separated, nor of Naruto, whom she hoped that she would have the fortune to never meet. Fed up of waiting, she got up from the undergrowth. But before she could embark on her journey to rendezvous with her beloved Sasuke-kun, she was startled by a light tap on her shoulder. "Yo," she turned to see Kakashi smiling at her. It was a moment later that she realized he was gone. She looked around, confused before a pain groan caught her attention. "Sakura ... help me." She saw Sasuke crawling towards her, his left arm reduced to a bloody stump, bleeding profusely from the many kunai and shuriken that were protruding out from his body. There were tears in her eyes as she tried to comprehend the scene before her. "No," she screamed before promptly fainting from shock. That clone was real. It wasn't a question. Naruto looked puzzled. "Is that a problem?" Sasuke didn't answer, and instead he settled for a sneer. The boy was proving to be far more competent than he expected. "I do not need your help, Uzumaki," Sasuke spat out, scanning his surroundings for one gray-haired Jounin sensei before turning back to glare at Naruto. His chakra was low at the moment, and he didn't feel like indulging the blonde that information. "Nor do I feel that you need it," Naruto countered, eyes impassive as always, "but it would be wise to reconsider. Our opponent is Jounin after all." The boy had a point, not that Sasuke would ever admit. "What do you suggest then?" Sasuke asked, even though he knew the answer to that. He just didn't like to be the one to ask for help. There was a brief spark of annoyance in Naruto's eyes before he answered. "What I'm saying, Uchiha, is that we work together along with Haruno. Do you realize that there are only 2 bells?" Sasuke's tone was snide, which roughly translates into "one will be sent back to the academy, and it ain't going to be me." The glint came into the boy's eyes and he frowned. If you've been reading the basics of shinobi tactical efficiency, you would know that almost every combat-intensive grouping has 3 members. And Kakashi-sensei never said that not getting a bell means failure. Sasuke scowled. "Your point being, why do you think that Kakashi-sensei only has 2 bells when normal teams have 3 members?" Naruto asked quietly, disturbingly clear eyes intent on the Uchiha's response. When Sasuke stayed silent, he continued. "He wants us to assume that the bells are crucial to success, but they are not, only serving as a distraction from the true goal of this whole exercise, which is teamwork." The Uchiha answered, dark eyes filled with a momentary understanding. Truth be told, he was a bit resentful that Naruto caught on to the deception before he did. Naruto nodded. "So do you understand?" Sasuke grunted. "I will follow your lead ... for now." It was clear that Sasuke was taking a lot for him to say that. And that was enough for Naruto. "Good. We should go get Haruno." A shrill scream pierced through the woods at that moment. "No, or not," Sasuke said smugly, before noticing Naruto squatting down on ground. "What are you doing?" Sasuke asked curiously as he watched Naruto slowly form a set of seals. "Making my distraction," Naruto said simply. Kakashi dispelled the genjutsu and looked down on the unconscious pink pile that was Sakura. His sweat dropped. Maybe I shouldn't have gone too far. With that, he moved on, using his tracking skills to find the rest of his team. He didn't get very far when he finally stopped at a clearing. There was a slight whistling in the air, a sharp pitch which he recognized as a sound that only can be caused by thrown shuriken and kunai. Immediately, he substituted himself with a nearby log and watched as the projectiles strike the log from his new position on a nearby tree. If his students were smart, they would have known that such blatant attacks were of no use at all. There was a very loud rustle and Kakashi looked to the source, mildly surprised to see Naruto step out from one of the bushes. The boy stood still, his eyes staring at the log embedded with shuriken and kunai. Naruto, as he had seen earlier with his fight with Sasuke, was fairly competent in taijutsu. His knowledge about ninjutsu was further confirmed when the boy performed a cage bunshin, which was supposedly a jounin technique, though Kakashi doubted that the boy could have anything more dangerous than that. He had seen what the boy had been capable of in the academy and he wasn't impressed in the least. Suddenly his skin tingled, and it always did when something very untoward was about to happen to him. He turned to find that Naruto had his gaze on him. Kakashi swore, momentarily forgetting that it was a training exercise rather than live combat. He quickly moved to a new location, before taking a moment or two to orientate himself. Shinobi weren't in the habit of being discovered and it was rather disconcerting for an elite ninja to be spotted hiding so easily. I definitely need to recheck Naruto's records after this. From what he had seen of Naruto up to now, Kakashi began re-evaluating his view on one Uzumaki Naruto. The boy was definitely not as untalented as the school reports had claimed otherwise. Before he could finish thinking, another barrage of projectiles flew at him, forcing him to keep being mobile. Somehow, he knew that Naruto was responsible for all the traps he had encountered so far. Instead of risky close combat, he had opted to use projectiles instead. Clever. Soon, the barrage stopped and he leapt down onto the soft grass. Deciding it was better to stop playing around, he lifted up his Hidayate, his Sharingan eye twitching as light entered the cornea. Kakashi gave him surroundings a brief scan, trying to find any hint as to where his students might be. There, to the south of his position, his eyes, or rather, his Sharingan, spotted a very faint flare of chakra. Its purpose served, Kakashi lowered his Hidayate over his left eye once more. Leaping onto a nearby tree, he observed the spot where he saw the chakra flare. Even without the Sharingan, he could tell, with a certain degree of accuracy, where a person was by tracking their chakra signature, a skill which he had found most useful. The signature that he felt moments ago was gone. Kakashi frowned. Something was amiss here. Whish, crap, more kunai and shuriken flew towards him, forcing him to land out in the open clearing. Almost instantly, several copies of Naruto popped into existence, all of whom were surrounding him in a very loose circle, their faces impassive as they raised their kunai at him. This must be Naruto's idea once again, he thought dryly, trying to discern which of the dozen clones or so was the real one. But Kakashi had no intention of fighting them. Oh no, he knew that discretion was the better part of valor and that some battles weren't worth fighting, and this was one of them. He had to give Naruto credit though, the strategy he used was taken straight out from an academy textbook. Word for word, it seemed. Kakashi began mentally reciting to himself a phrase that was fitting. Lure your enemy into a position of weakness. Surround him with distractions, traps, and ploys. And attack with full confidence of victory. Sasuke was hiding behind a thick underbush, watching as the clones proceeded to fight the Jounin on more or less equal footing, supported by Naruto from afar. For some unfathomable reason, they were actually holding off the Jounin within a certain degree of success. Whenever Kakashi gotten too far an advantage, he would be interrupted by sporadic bursts of fire and kunai coming from a different direction every time, courtesy of the blonde, who would then summon up more clones for Kakashi to be occupied with. He was also quite surprised to find that Naruto knew a thing or two about fire jutsu, seeing that he had failed to perform anything noteworthy in the academy. It was the same type of surprise he had felt when he realized that Naruto had been able to produce real bunshins, along with very liberal quantities of cage kunai, and they were both techniques that he had no idea were possible. Sasuke scowled. He was going to have to up his training regime to compensate when this was all over. He could not afford to be second best. But for now, he pushed back the thoughts of revenge and focused on his current goal. His job was simple: wait until Kakashi-sensei showed an opening, and then he would strike. Kakashi always prided himself to be a great judge of ability. But this time, however, he had underestimated the sheer tenacity of his students by a wide margin. Not to say that his skills were lousy though, as if this had been a normal mission, it wouldn't have been a problem. But it wasn't, and he wasn't that willing to risk injuring his students by using one of his more advanced techniques. Hence came the problem with the several cage bunshin which were now systematically wearing down his defenses. While Kakashi excelled in the skill of staving off multiple opponents, he wasn't quite thrilled when he found that for every clone that he put out of existence, 2 more would immediately take its place. Normally, the trick to deal with cage bunshins was to use a henge and blend in, but it was quite difficult to do so when there were several clones which were attacking from all sides and that there was a distraction or another every time he tried to perform any hand seals. While he was busy dodging the clones and fire jutsu, he failed to notice Sasuke, who was watching his back for quite some time. The clones renewed their attacks, forcing Kakashi to move backwards. Kakashi stumbled for a brief second. There was an opening. Now, Sasuke charged using his chakra-enhanced speed, his hands missing the bells at Kakashi's waist by an inch as the Jounin flung himself back from the Uchiha. At this, Sasuke smirked, which made Kakashi worry a bit. The feeling was well-founded when 2 clones appeared from behind to grab him. But as soon as the clones touched him, Kakashi turned into smoke, replaced by one of the other nearby clones. Sasuke's smirk was replaced by a scowl. Nearby upon a tree, Kakashi found himself feeling a bit smug. However, for all their innovations of thought, they still had a long way before they could begin to outsmart him. Katen, Gaokakyu no Jutsu. Hey, a genin shouldn't have enough chakra for that technique. Apparently, he assumed wrong about Sasuke as he watched a fireball, greater in size than the one Sasuke had used on him previously, soaring towards the tree he was perched on. Deciding it was a good time to abandon the tree, he jumped and rolled to the ground. There were a few clones to greet him in a shower of punches and kicks, all of which he dispatched easily. And Naruto too, he thought as he remembered the numbers of cage bunshin the boy had pitted against him. Quickly, he performed the hand seals to one of his all-time favorite skills, Daten, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Looking down on the boy's head, he said, Lesson 3, Ninjutsu. You and Naruto are quite far up in this area. A little too far. He looked at Sasuke in the eye, expecting to find all sorts of emotions on his face, but was surprised to find only simple apathy. He frowned, his gut feeling acting up again. Sasuke smirked before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Kakashi widened his eye in surprise. Cage bunshin. Before he could react, 2 clones burst up from the ground, immediately grabbing a hold of Kakashi, pinning in place. Sasuke and Naruto, the real one he guessed, jumped out of hiding before rushing towards him, intent on the bells. There was a slight beep from his wrist and he frowned. Time for some drastic action. Stop, he exclaimed to his 2 charging students. The 2 genin stopped in mid-strike, expecting an answer, and Kakashi delivered. Lunch break, was all he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The expression Kakashi saw on their faces almost made him smile, as he disappeared in a puff of smoke a moment later. Kakashi had told them that since they failed to get a bell from him before the time limit, they would have redo the whole thing again later. which was good in a sense because it meant that they hadn't totally failed. However, on the other end of the spectrum, Kakashi also announced rather cheerfully that it was going to be much more difficult to pass than before. He handed the two boys a box lunch each, informing them that they had half an hour for lunch and were strictly forbidden to share any food whatsoever with Sakura, who was currently tied to a stump, on the consequence of failure. By this time, Sakura had woken up, screaming Sasuke-kun, and was now trying very hard not to look depressed or embarrassed. Making sure that Kakashi was out of sight and hearing, Naruto procured a kunai and began cutting her bonds. "Naruto, what the hell are you doing?" Sakura squealed. "You're going to get Sasuke-kun in trouble." Naruto made a puzzled face. "He didn't say anything about letting you loose, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to get cramps." Sakura didn't say anything to that. There was silence and neither boys had touched their food. She felt quite hungry as she hadn't eaten anything for hours and tried to contain her desire to ask for food. "Jiara rule." Both heads turned to a flush-looking Sakura. "It's nothing really," as if to disprove her words. A significantly louder growl came from her stomach and Sakura immediately looked away, blushing. Sasuke contemplated for a moment before he grudgingly offered his bento set to the girl. "Here." Sakura looked both horrified and dreamy. "But Kakashi-sensei explicitly told you not to give me any food." "You can have my portion as well if you wish," Naruto said quietly, and he too pushed his bento set towards the girl. Sakura still looked hesitant. "But," Sasuke gave a snort. "Look, Kakashi's not here and I can't have you as a liability later when you're hungry." As soon as he said that, there was a loud boom and there was smoke all around. "You guys." There, standing behind them in the fading smoke, was Kakashi. His face obscured by the mask was now menacing, displeased by their disobedience. Then almost instantly, all of that vanished, replaced by a wide Cheshire grin that they felt rather than saw. Pass forward. This chapter is a filler arc and therefore is very long. Be warned, I have noticed that a lot of readers are concerned about Naruto being normal, but I assure you that's not the case. Scroll to the end for me to clarify. They couldn't believe their ears. Sakura broke the silence first. "Pass. But why?" she blurted out. Her shock and to a lesser extent, her delight, was displayed for all to see. "You guys were the first," Kakashi said quietly. "The rest were morons who just followed what I said." He walked to a stab of chiseled stone not far from them, and the three genin followed meekly behind, waiting. "Those who don't follow the rules are trash. That is the unwritten rule of the shinobi world," Kakashi said, cutting the silence. "But you know what? Those who leave their teammates behind are even worse than trash. While individual strength is important to a ninja, teamwork is far more important, and that is what the bell test is used to test for," he continued, his back still turned. "To find a willingness of cooperation within potential ninja candidates. Look at the names carved on this stone. They're all heroes who died in the line of duty." He trailed off, a wistful note to his voice. "My best friend's name is also on it." It was a look that Naruto failed to understand. Why would anyone want to dwell within memories that can only cause grief? But the nostalgia was replaced as quickly as it came. Regardless, as of today, he changed the subject abruptly, his gloom vanishing in an instant. "You're all officially genins. I expect you all to be here at the same time tomorrow as well." Suffice to say, he arrived a few hours later than scheduled, much to the chagrin of his students. For the rest of the week, Team 7 had been engaged in all manner of D-rank missions, from garden weeding to pet retrieval. Finally, after what all of them could agree is their first proverbial week of hell, Kakashi brought them to the expansive fields of the training areas, announcing to them that they would be spending the rest of their time engaged in specialized training. On the first day of the sessions, he had instructed them on the tree walking exercise. While the concept had been relatively easy for his students to grasp, putting theory into practice had proved far difficult than they had expected. Sakura was the only one who completed the course without stumbling, and Kakashi sent her along to build up her much-needed chakra reserves. Surprisingly, Naruto finished the exercise next, leaving a seething Sasuke behind. It was not long before the Uchiha completed the course too. Kakashi clapped his hands. "Since you all performed amicably on such a difficult exercise, I guess it's time to move on to something a little more fun." "Naruto, Sasuke," he said, his gaze directed at the two, pointing to the large clearing behind them. "Spar over there. I will be watching to correct any mistakes you make later on." Sasuke's smirk was arrogant, like the ones Kakashi saw regularly on the main branch of the Hyuga. He frowned slightly. He really needed to talk to Sasuke sometime soon. However, the voice of logic in his head said that rivalry in teams was common and good for development and that it was just a natural phase. Shaking off his thoughts, he focused on Naruto, who just stood immobile. "Naruto?" Kakashi asked. "You listening?" The boy blanked out, before turning to stare at Kakashi. "Did you say something, Sensei? I asked you to move over there." He nodded once, before turning to follow Sasuke. Begin. As expected, Sasuke made the first move, hands fumbling quickly through the seals necessary for a grand fireball technique. Katen, Gaokakyu no Jutsu. It was a little overkill for use in a sparring match, Kakashi admitted, but he continued watching from the sidelines, and would intervene only if things got too out of hand. Naruto dodged, jumping as he summoned out a couple of clones for a counterattack. The fight continued, and Kakashi could see a familiar pattern of attack emerge, with Sasuke favoring the use of his potent fire techniques, while the only technique Naruto had used at all was the Cage Bunshin. Both were proficient in taijutsu, while Sasuke had grace and raw power to his moves, which was a thumbs up in Kakashi's eyes. Naruto executed his strikes in efficient and mechanical manner, never using more or less than what was required. The shinobi part of him, the one that had been ingrained in him since childhood, knew that Naruto was the better fighter of the two. A shinobi does not show emotion, he is a tool, but even Kakashi knows that raw, raging emotion is better than cold and disinterested apathy. In the end, Naruto's extensive use of tactics had exhausted the boy, leaving the Uchiha literally at his mercy. He took Sasuke at knife point and paused. It was quite a shock then, when he blanked out and collapsed to the ground. There is something wrong with him. A hand gesture pointed to the boy lying comatose in a hospital bed, behind a room of glass windows. Sarutobi nodded. I see that famed observation skills of yours hadn't wasted over the years, Kakashi. You're avoiding the question, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi chuckled a bit before his face became grim. Yes, I suppose I was, he said stiffly. You notice the ease of how he seemingly absorbs all the information that you teach. Kakashi nodded, eyes turning serious. He knows things, down to the smallest of details, things that no genin could possibly remember. He is a genius of the highest order, simply put. And yet, he has his flaws, little particularities that no shinobi should ever have. He trailed off, trying to find the words to describe the boy. And then, Sarutobi waited for the hammer to fall. He is a genius, but not yet a genius. I remember the day he got attacked, Sarutobi said offhandedly. You were the first on the scene, were you not? Kakashi nodded once more, but did not offer any more information. The Hokage always knew the answers to the questions he was asking, and it is how the person in question reacted that mattered to him. Kakashi showed once more why he was once ANBU, never flinching from the probing glance of one of the most powerful men on the continent. We do not know for sure what has happened to his mind, only that it gives Naruto a few particular disabilities, though the exact extent and number of those is unknown. Kakashi glanced at the peaceful face of his student. Is this part of his disabilities? Yes, Sarutobi said, taking a drag from his weed pipe. Naruto seems to react badly to any concept of change or discontinuity of what he perceives as the truth. Like the time he memorized the entire 12 volumes of Advanced Tactics in Warfare immediately before reading Art of War. Both of which, I'm sure you know, are very conflicting in the details, but they essentially amount to the same thing in practice. He continued, ignoring the look that his subordinate gave him. But it does not seem that way for Naruto. His mind fails to recognize the similarities and thus classifies them as two separate things altogether, in which his mind then divides the information into separate blocks and refers to them according when he encounters them, using only one set of information at a time as his absolute truth. Kakashi was surprisingly calm when he finished, Sarutobi noted with amusement. Not many had acted with apathy at the boy's almost impossible feats. Hokage-sama, are you sure? Kakashi asked somewhat dubiously. Those books are difficult even for an adult to remember, and yet. Sarutobi chuckled. The medic nins acted the same way as you did when Naruto said that he memorized everything, word for word. He got until the 5th volume when we asked him to stop. Kakashi opted not to say anything on that point. Then ... if the reason why Naruto keeps getting these seizures now is because he learned something in contradiction to his existing rules, why did he get it during training of all other times? You do not know him as well as I do, though that isn't your fault, Sarutobi sighed. You see, Naruto only believes that fighting should only be used as a last resort. It is more like a self-imposed rule actually. All the times he has ever fought have been either in self-defense or when he has been allowed to with good reason. Instantly, Kakashi remembered the fight that Naruto and Sasuke had before. Sasuke had attacked first. Naruto was passive, or at least, he was until Sasuke punched him in the face. There was something else that he needed to know. And what of his knowledge of the Cage Bunshin? I don't really believe that he could have learned it by just trial and error, especially when he couldn't produce a normal Bunshin in the academy. You remember the incident with the stealing of the Scroll of Seals? He asked, still smoking his pipe. When Kakashi gave a nod, he continued. Naruto took it by the instruction of the traitor, Mizuki, he explained lightly with a look of practiced nonchalance. He managed to master almost all of the techniques there. It wasn't any surprise when he saw Kakashi snap his head towards him in an instant. Almost all. Kakashi choked, failing to contain himself this time around. Then why did he only use the Cage Bunshin by this point? He was almost ranting. And he had good reason to. He had known a lot of the techniques within that scroll, and of the damage they could do if they fell into the wrong hands. The ANBU were not known as the Black Ops for nothing. It is because I forbade him to. Kakashi knew that was the end of that discussion. I trust that you will keep this secret. Yes, of course, Hokage-sama. He calmed himself, his emotions suppressed as his tried and true facade of casualness came into place. Sarutobi knew it was a mask, but he knew that the former ANBU will follow his orders. In any case, his condition will happen at the most inopportune moments, he said, and then, he will adapt by creating another set of guidelines in which he would follow without question until a contradiction comes along. And the process repeats itself. Kakashi finished. Sarutobi nodded. He used to get it all the time regardless of stimuli, but it happens rarely now. Still, it is best not to take any chances, so I suggest you make your explanations flexible and easily left open to interpretation. That way, he would be less likely to experience what he did today. Kakashi frowned. This is going to be difficult. I never said that it was going to be simple, Kakashi. Bear patience and tolerance to teaching him, Sarutobi said, before turning to leave the room. He can be difficult to reach sometimes. He took one look at the bedridden boy and nodded. I understand, Hokage-sama. The next day, Naruto reported at the training fields, looking as if yesterday had never happened. Sasuke and Sakura pretended to look nonchalant, but he knew better. They were all curious as to what illness had managed to bring him down. He titled his head slightly forward. I apologize for the trouble I have caused. Kakashi just waved it off, hand in possession of his ika-ika. It was no trouble at all, he said, before breaking out cheerfully. Since we're all here, let's start, shall we? Sakura, continue with the tree walking exercise. Suffice to say, she was annoyed. Why do I still have to practice this when Sasuke-kun and Naruto don't? Kakashi turned towards the kunoichi, his eye never leaving his book. The action startled her. What? Kunoichi have very low reserves of chakra, so it's natural that they have high control over it, he explained, with his only eye still glued to the ika-ika in his hand. You want to learn what I can teach. Get more chakra, and the only way you're going to get that is through tree climbing. He turned away before Sakura could retort. Sasuke, Naruto, come over here, he yelled as he watched the girl huffing away angrily from the corner of his eye. It was for her own good after all, and besides, he was sure that Sasuke wouldn't appreciate the girl to keep staring at him. You both have well enough chakra for the basic stuff, so I will be first teaching you that. The problem is that I will only teach you things that complement your style, so I will need you guys to tell me what you have and I will decide from there. Understand? Sasuke looked annoyed at the prospect of not learning all of what he could, but he complied nonetheless. I have Katen techniques and a few general stealth techniques. I don't really feel the need to learn any defensive jutsu. At his tone, Kakashi raised an eyebrow. I see, he said. Kakashi bit his hand, his other hand fishing out a scroll from his jacket pocket, before smearing blood onto the paper. A puff of smoke later, a dirty brown scroll appeared into his waiting hands. He tossed the scroll to Sasuke, who caught it neatly. This is an earth technique, he said, watching his charge's face frown in distaste. And before you ask me to teach you any fire techniques, the answer is no. This time the frown evolved into a fully fledged glare, but Kakashi ignored it. He had been subjected to worse. Now, he eyed his students in a mock suspicious manner. I'm sure that you know that stone, or anything for that matter, is weak against jutsu, am I correct? He was satisfied with the two nods that followed, and he continued, but that can and will change when you imbue chakra to the surface, as it forms a protective layer above it, essentially rendering it resilient to anything. As he was saying that, he performed a single seal before placing his hands on a conveniently nearby rock. Immediately it began to glow with a blue sheen. To prove his point, he then punched the outcrop next to it with a chakra-enhanced fist. It crumbled almost instantaneously. He did the same on the imbued one. This time nothing happened. While the technique of imbuing alone is useful, you wouldn't be learning it, not for now at least. This is for demonstration purposes only. Again, Sasuke frowned as the opportunity of learning yet another useful technique slipped away. Sasuke, the boy in question, looked up, annoyance in his eyes. Use the best technique you got on that. Kakashi pointed to the rock before he and Naruto moved a fair distance away. He scoffed, but complied, his hands forming seals lazily before finally raising his index and middle finger to his lip. Katen, Ryuka no Jutsu. A stream of red flames burst out from his mouth, continuing for several seconds or so before it waned and stopped completely. The smoke that was caused from the jutsu lessened up and revealed the aftermath of Sasuke's attempt. The grass surrounding the grass was burnt, which was hardly any surprise, and even the shattered fragments of the stone Kakashi previously destroyed disintegrated from the heat, but the imbued stone remained. It stood silent, as if mocking the Uchiha with its continued existence. Sasuke scowled, miffed at the fact that he failed. Now, notice that the difference, Kakashi said, performing hand seals as he did. Daten, Yuyuin away but no jutsu. The protective field flickered for less than a second before dying out, and the rock was shattered by a great spire of earth which had erupted from the ground, before promptly sinking back into the soil. Sasuke had a glint in his eyes, as the cogs in his mind turned as he witnessed the potential of the technique. But Kakashi was not finished. However, he stressed, the purpose of this technique is not offensive, though as you've seen, it can be used that way. What I want you to do is this. Once more, Kakashi performed a short set of seals before slamming his hands down to the ground. A somewhat neat slab of earth rose up from the ground. Whatever eagerness that Sasuke had before vanished. Any genin worth their salt could destroy a summoned barrier within seconds. Try a grand fireball on it, Kakashi offered. Sasuke did what he was told. A moment later, the fireball crashed into the barrier, sending a lot of smoke into the air. When the air settled, the barrier was still standing, apparently undamaged from the attack. Kakashi looked unsurprised. Sasuke was now trying very hard not to gape. How, out of all the 5 different elemental jutsu, earth-based techniques require the least chakra to be used, compared to lightning and fire-based techniques. While it is undeniable that both of those elements are very effective in terms of offense, it will still fall short at a defensive Daten technique. he explained, gesturing to the barrier that he erected just before. Seeing no response from either pupil, Kakashi continued, because it relies so little on chakra and more of its surroundings. Daten barriers deflect, rather than absorb the energy of other jutsu. To put it simply, any concentrated chakra which hits it, or in this case, jutsu, will be broken up by this effect, rendering virtually almost all high chakra jutsu useless. The only thing which could tear apart a Daten barrier would have to be a wind technique, which in turn can be countered easily by either fire or lightning techniques, so on and so forth. Hence the reason why there are 5 great shinobi powers instead of 1. Looking at the blank looks his students were now giving him, Kakashi just sighed. But all politics aside, what you have in the end is a reliable shield capable of withstanding the most potent of jutsu that anybody can throw at you. The implication was left hanging. If Sasuke mastered the technique, it would render him, in essence, invulnerable from any kind of elemental attack. He almost shivered at the thought. Still think it is useless? Kakashi asked of the Uchiha cheerfully, to which Sasuke didn't have the cheek of answering. No, then, try to master the technique by creating various shapes and sizes. Now, go somewhere else. Kakashi shooed a frowning Sasuke away, while at the same time, mysteriously procuring his Ika into his hands once more. Naruto, he turned towards the blonde once Sasuke ventured to an empty part of the clearing to begin practicing. I had spoken to Hokage-sama about your unique ailment. Naruto blinked. He was confused for a moment, before the implication of his words started to sink in. You know, Naruto breathed out. Kakashi nodded. Hokage-sama felt it prudent to tell me. Naruto stared blankly, its cold intensity rivaling the most heated expression of rage that he had ever received. But apathy was so much more dangerous than emotion. The Jounin sighed, trying to shake off the shivers that ran across his skin. I got nothing useful to teach you, seeing that you have read that scroll, but... He bit into his thumb again, smearing it across another scroll. I think you may find this useful. Kakashi handed a white scroll that he summoned to Naruto, who hesitantly accepted it. Oh, and before I forget, he said, voice bored and flat, Hokage-sama wants to see you tomorrow. In the end, training had ended on a dull note, with Sasuke being proficient enough to conjure a barrier whenever needed. Sakura was exhausted by the time the training had ended, though she perked up slightly when Kakashi had said that she would be allowed to learn some new techniques in a few days' time before slumping into a funk, realizing that she had 3 more days or so before she could learn the aforementioned techniques. Naruto observed all of this silently, before deciding to leave immediately with his scroll in tow, back to home. Home was a rundown apartment building south from the village central, neglected since the end of the wars when the owner had died without any immediate family or successors. The village council took custody of it and refurnished it as a dormitory for war orphans. While there were ninja who lived there, most of its previous tenants have moved to new and better apartments over the years, thus leaving building empty and quiet. He didn't mind it though, he was accustomed with the silence. Sometimes, it allowed him to think of, but not always. He never felt the need to though, as he often busied himself with his books. He took a slurp from the cup of instant ramen that prepared earlier, chewing as his eyes scanned the scroll he'd gotten from Kakashi-sensei. But he found his attention drifting towards his team. He had always been a loner in the academy, watching as one class after another graduate while he stayed on. They had left him alone and he had felt no need to associate himself with anybody. Now it was different, he could no longer be as distant as he wished. Though it was merely a bud now, he felt a bond form when he and Sasuke teamed up on Kakashi. It was an anomaly, and if it was one thing he didn't like, it was being unsure. He frowned, before turning his attention back to medical herbs and their uses, and began reading once more. The next day, Naruto found himself walking towards the Hokage Tower. As a reward for their efforts, Kakashi had given Team 7 a day off, much to his and Sasuke's chagrin. Sakura, on the other hand, had been relieved at the chance to be able to rest properly, for the previous day's training had all but worn her out. He bumped into someone, causing both of them to fall down. He got up, brushing himself off before taking a good look at the person who bumped into him. It was a girl from his former class recognized, with short azure-tinted hair and lavender eyes. Hyuga-san, he nodded to the still girl, who flushed when he offered his hand. Naruto-kun, she greeted shyly, accepting his help while she steadied the basket on her arm. He stared at the girl's lavender eyes, finding them odd and yet so delicately entrancing. His gaze lowered to the small basket she was cradling. Isn't that lana root? He asked, pointing to the small herb among the many that were cradled in the girl's basket. Despite its deceptively sickly appearance, it was a vital ingredient for many of the more potent drugs and medicines used by the village. It was, however, notoriously difficult to find and pick from the area, as its shape resembled many wild flowers which littered across the training fields. Why yes, Hinata half whispered and half stuttered, startled by the blonde's question. She hadn't known anyone besides herself who had any interest in herbs, so her surprise was natural. Naruto nodded to himself. It's a good herb. You have good eyes to have picked it. Thank you. Though it was true in the strictest sense, Hinata could not help but feel elated to have someone compliment her little crush on the blonde notwithstanding. With that, he continued on his way, leaving behind a fully blushing Hyuga heiress. How are you feeling, Naruto-kun? Sarutobi asked amicably from his seat. No pain or ache, I suppose. No, Sarutobi-sama. The boy fished out a small yellow packet. The medicine you gave me works really well. Good, the man said, watching as the boy tucked the medicine back into his pocket. I expected no less. Is there a reason why you've called me here today? Naruto asked, eyes blank and voice impassive. Yes, he said, bringing a hand to his temples. It's about that scroll. Naruto paused. What about it? I need to check something, he said briskly. Could you perform the Myokin Shaoheki no Jutsu? Naruto nodded, and soon there was a black cube of flame on the face of his palm. It was flawless in its shape, immaculate and simple in its elegance. Sarutobi squinted at it for a moment before relaxing his eyes. His face was grave for a second before it turned into kindly consideration. You can release the jutsu now, Naruto. The cube dissipated in bluish flame a second later. It was at that moment when a boy of 8 or so rushed in. Fight me now, Jai Jai, he yelled, hands preparing to throw a shuriken, and then, thump, he fell flat on his face. Sarutobi groaned, wondering how much longer his grandson would keep up at this. You there, he shouted at Naruto, you tripped me, didn't you? Naruto stared at the hyperventilating boy for a moment before bringing up his hand to flick the younger boy's forehead. Ouch, you should learn not to accuse people so readily, little leaflet, he said, just as a man, whose eyes were obscured by a pair of sunglasses, rushed in that exact moment to see the flick. He's the Hokage's grandson, you insolent brat. The man squawked indignantly at the blonde, his finger deviating from one boy to another. Grandson or not, he needs to learn some manners. Surely, you agree. Naruto turned to regard the new arrival coolly. The man took a step back at the intensity for the boy's glance, his normal verbal eloquence failing him for the first time. Naruto bowed curtly to Sarutobi and left, leaving behind an amused Hokage, an indignant elite tutor, and a very surprised boy. Konohamaru stared. No one had made Abisu-sensei speechless before. Ever. He had even heard that the blonde guy had managed to sneak past his grandpa, the strongest person in the village. Face set into resolve, Konohamaru gathered his wits and rushed out of the office. After Konohamaru left, Abisu turned a hesitant look at his superior. Was it the Kyuubi brat? Yes, Sarutobi smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. Though I suggest you best find your charge, you do not agree. Abisu quickly hurried out. After noticing the younger boy following him for the 5th time or so, Naruto went over to a poorly patched section of the wall and yanked it hard. The resulting gasp of surprise made him arch an eyebrow in detached amusement. Some people had odd ways of getting attention. I suppose there is a reason for you to be following me, he asked, hands still grasping the camouflage cloak. The boy grumbled a response. I heard you managed to sneak past the old geezer. Yes, so. The boy lowered his head, this time, mumbling far too low for the blonde to hear. I beg your pardon, he asked once again. The boy looked up, eyes bearing an emotion he was unfamiliar with. Teach me all that you know so I can defeat Grandpa, please. There was desperation in his voice. A pause. Why? Konohamaru gritted his teeth, his voice becoming bitter. Because nobody sees me for me, all they see is the Hokage's grandson. Naruto could understand the motive, though it was alien to him. Acknowledgement was something that he had been denied before, and he had long learned to survive without it. So, is there any weakness that you know that you want to exploit? At this, Konohamaru grinned evilly, taking his question as acceptance. Grandpa's a pervert. I caught him reading one of those books my sensei keeps hiding. Naruto had a sinking feeling in his gut, remembering a certain gray-haired sensei giggling over a certain orange-colored book. Let me guess. Ika Paradise. Yes, that's the one. Naruto blinked. So, Sarutobi-sama is a pervert as well. Perverts, as Naruto found out before, were particularly weak against certain things. He didn't create anything to exploit that, as he felt no need to before. We can work on that, he said somewhat unsurely. You know how to henge. Yup. And so the training started. After testing out the finished technique on some unsuspecting adults, both Naruto and Konohamaru concluded with confidence that such a technique would be capable of defeating almost all of the male adult population in Konoha. I suppose that would be enough, Naruto said, glancing up from his magazine in hand to the supple and barely clothed woman in front of him. It would serve its purpose. A poof later revealed an elated Konohamaru. Really? All right. It still doesn't have a name yet though, Naruto pointed out. Konohamaru deflated. You're right. Then he bounced right up. I got it. How about we call it the sexy no jutsu? Naruto nodded. It's appropriate. Silence reigned for a moment before Naruto spoke. Are you serious about wanting to achieve the title of Hokage? Of course. Remember, he said, eyes so full of somberness that Konohamaru gulped. If you want the name Hokage that everyone will acknowledge. There are no shortcuts. Naruto paused and his somberness disappeared. That aside, it would best if you only use that technique in specific situations. You wouldn't want to become like your sensei, would you? Konohamaru nodded vigorously. There was a slight rustle from the nearby bushes, indicating an unknown and unwelcome presence which Naruto had noticed for a long time now. Abisu-san, you can stop hiding now, he said, ignoring the surprised look that Konohamaru was giving him. It was then Abisu popped out from his hiding spot, cheeks flushed with anger and embarrassment. Young master, I've come to take you home. No, don't get in my way, the boy yelled, hands forming a seal. Sexy no jutsu. Konohamaru transformed and Abisu had to redirect his chakra to prevent the blood from spurting through his nose. How had the boy known of his fixation to brunettes? Has such a vulgar skill. He half yelled, half stuttered, more for his ego and pseudo-morality than anything else. I'm your best shortcut to becoming Hokage. Let's go, young master, before he corrupts you even further. Naruto resisted the urge to sigh. For a pervert, Abisu was rather adamant about it than most. Everyone he and Konohamaru experimented on went from conscious to knocked out within 2 seconds after the use of the sexy no jutsu. That had to mean something. Kage Bunshin no jutsu. At this, Abisu smirked at the masses of clones. I'm no amateur like Mizuki. Wear a few clones to an elite tutor like me. He dropped into a ninjutsu taijutsu stance. Do your worst. The massive army of Naruto's formed a single tiger seal and Abisu tensed for a moment. Were they going to perform a Katen technique? Henge. There was a great plume of smoke which cleared to reveal the one thing he least expected. Women of different shapes, sizes, and hair color. But they all shared something in common. They were almost naked, and each and every one of them had to be the sexiest thing that he had ever seen since sliced bread and butter. Blood threatened to gush from his nasal orifices, but he endured them with chakra-enforced barriers. He had to. All of them made provocative motions and noises. His brain overloaded and the blood rushed through the feeble barriers, throwing him back several feet and into land all at the same time. Konohamaru had only one thing to say. Wicked. Days were spent on training or missions. The more interesting and productive of these was the training which was held every other day after a particularly mind-numbing mission. It had been a few days since his little tutorship of Konohamaru and Naruto could honestly say that it had been the only highlight of the week, though he was less affected by the monotony than the others whom made up his team. Before, they used to anticipate with excitement as to what missions that were assigned to them. The present, however, had been an entirely different matter altogether. Kakashi appeared half an hour late, to the chagrin of Sakura and Sasuke, despite having come earlier than usual by a good 15 minutes. Being late earlier didn't exactly constitute as being early. Yo, Kakashi waved. I got lost on the road of life. When he got no response, he straightened up a bit. I got you guys another mission. It's good too. What, like that wonderful D rank the last time? Sakura asked sarcastically, having filled her fair share of the notoriously dissatisfying D ranks. Normally, she was polite and courteous, but combined with the boredom of missions and general resentment of Kakashi's tardiness, she had somehow unhinged and became fierier than she normally was. It was also probably because that, out of the three, she had been the one most subjected to the grueling and often repetitive strength training that Kakashi had thought up for them. Kakashi's only eye remained crinkled. Nope, but I got a C rank for you guys. The mere mention of a mission higher than D rank brightened up the mood instantly. So, Sasuke spoke up for the first time since his arrival. When do we start? Unbeta ed may contain possible, spelling divided by etc. errors. We'll look over and upload edited copy when I have the time. Please, highlight them in your reviews if you find any. There's only one thing I can say about the current Naruto episodes. By God, they suck. It is as if they hired a guy on crack to do the storylines. I wouldn't mind if they did it with some sense of decentness, but seriously, I cringe every time some random bandit gets hit by Naruto because they cut on the fighting animation as well. Bloody arseholes. On to fanfic-related matters. First thing first, it isn't going to be Naruhina, and besides, I don't know whether I can add romance without screwing the whole thing over. Hopefully, the chapter turns out good for all of you, though personally, I felt that the chapter was a bit choppy. Making up new stuff is hard. The next chapter will be shorter, so probably it wouldn't take as long as this one did. Once again, thanks to everyone who reviewed. I would have put up a thank you list, but that would delay the posting time even further. To answer a lot of concern about Naruto's apparent or visible lack of mental trauma, I have written a short essay-length answer below for your perusal. Naruto is semi-autistic. Now, why did I decide that he is semi and not completely? First, creating a story where Naruto has to be completely taken care of seems ridiculously difficult to write, especially if I have to somehow let him become a ninja, which I'm sure all of you know is hazardous and requires one to be at least capable of looking out for himself, to make the story more or less familiar for you guys. Secondly, Naruto supposedly died when he had that jutsu cast on him. It basically rendered him a vegetable, but Kyuubi healed him and has doing so been ever since, and it's the only thing that's keeping his mind together since his breaking. Doesn't mean that he's perfect and all healthy though. He experiences the same symptoms and problems of an autistic person, though a lot of it will be modified for the sake of the plot, and I will be throwing some kinks into the equation as well. He will break down completely if a certain someone messes up his seal. Hint, hint. Thirdly, just because he sounds coherent doesn't mean that he gets it easy. He will often be inattentive and do countless amounts of little things that set him apart from the rest. So please, don't say that he isn't having problems and not being challenged. Everyone is challenged, some more than others. I'm trying my best to make him as realistically as I can without seriously fucking him up to the point where he quits as a ninja and gets slammed back into an ANBU containment cell. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. If anybody is willing to provide me a site with good and easily understandable information about autism, feel free to do so. Blah denotes speech. Blah denotes sound. Blah denotes thoughts. Blah denotes demon talking. Forward, filler arc. Next chapter will be the start of the wave arc. Violence and killing in this chapter, so press the back button if such content offends you. 110206 edited and fix some errors. It was a simple mission for a C rank, Kakashi had assured them. They were supposed to clear out a brigand of raiders that were plaguing the trade routes between Fire and Earth, a mission request by one of the trading moguls of Fire. The training that took place after his briefing had been surprisingly light, and for good reason. Team 7 was to leave at dawn the next day. With afternoon giving way to evening, Naruto went to Ikikaru's for his daily dinner consisting of ramen. By the time he arrived, the final rays of the sun vanished beneath the horizon and the artificial city lights began to beam radiance through the darkening streets. It was by pure coincidence that he met a brooding Iruka. Iruka-sensei, he greeted the Chunin just as he was about to bring the first strands of noodles to his mouth. You look, Naruto frowned, pausing as he tried to find an appropriate word, troubled. Is something the matter? The man smiled, though Naruto could tell that it was forced. Really? Iruka asked in return. Maybe it's because I'm a little more tired than usual. He was avoiding the subject, but Naruto has enough sense and courtesy to let it slide. He nodded. I see, rest well then. You look better with a smile. Iruka let off a laugh at that before choosing to sit on the stool next to Naruto. He quietly ordered a bowl of miso ramen, before turning to look at the eating blonde. So how are you adjusting to genin life? It's okay and the missions are very undemanding. Kakashi-sensei always is late for our meetings. Naruto took another slurp from his noodles, though he teaches us well, I guess. The man chuckled, plunging his chopsticks into his recently arrived bowl of ramen. Your sensei always had a particularity for lateness. It's good to know he isn't completely ignoring his teaching duties. They ate in a comfortable silence, an unspoken rule between the two that made it somewhat accepted though they had rarely spoken before. Iruka was more concerned about Naruto than the rest of his students, because he knew Naruto was different in some way. How the boy spoke and interacted with his environment had led him to speculate many a time whether or not he was suitable for the ninja life. Any missions which brings you out of the village. He shook his head while slurping up his noodles. We never got a mission like that, though tomorrow would be the first. It's a C rank one. Iruka's previous expression came back, but once more Naruto didn't say anything. The teacher was silent for a while before he said, just be careful, okay. Naruto nodded, even though he did not understand why he needed to be careful. They sat in silence after that. The only sounds heard were from Naruto's constantly slurping noises and from the rowdy street outside. When Naruto was finally done after eating an impressive amount of 8 bowls, Iruka had offered to pay for the meal, though the boy had politely rejected his treat but thanked him for the offer nonetheless. He left, quietly saying his goodbyes, leaving behind an ever-frowning Iruka to stare at his back. They set off from the village gates the minute they were open, when the sun rose from oblivion only to lie motionlessly on the horizon. Their packs were light, carrying enough supplies to last for 6 days at most, which was, according to Kakashi, the time frame of which they would have to complete their mission and return to Konoha. Kakashi telling them that the journey would take 3 days at most and that they would have to camp once night started to set. Interaction between the members of Team 7 was null, and with the Jounin deciding that Ika Ika Paradise had more importance than mere idle conversation, it seemed like it would remain that way for quite some time. The only form of conversation that actually took place was between Sasuke and Sakura, though even then, it could hardly constitute as a conversation at all. Sasuke-kun, Sakura preened, coyly curling her cherry-pink hair with her fingers. Does my hair look all right today? The raven-haired boy just grunted out a reply, if only to stop the girl from simpering any further. Yes, it looks all right for the 8th time. He had wanted to add venomously but restrained himself, though frankly speaking, he really didn't care. Really? She asked once more, to the dismay of the boy. Do you really think that, Sasuke-kun? The boy in question just gritted his teeth, ignoring the very fantasizing look that his teammate had. He knew that he shouldn't have said anything in the first place. He glanced behind him, absently noting that Kakashi was still reading his so-called excuse for exotic literature. Exotic in the sense that there wasn't any book quite like it, and Sasuke found his face burning just after reading a few lines within a copy that he found discarded on one of the park benches. His eyes left his inattentive teacher to regard the smaller figure trailing silently behind. From the first time they had exchanged blows, Sasuke knew that Naruto was all that he could ask for in a rival. No one else till then had fought him to a standstill. No one else had displayed the sheer potential of strength that was a requirement for being his rival. But for all his hopes for a worthy rival to challenge, Sasuke was afraid of his growth. In a short span of time, Naruto proved himself far beyond the persona of a dropout, and had shattered almost every perceivable notion that Sasuke had of the boy. Where Naruto had failed to create a simple bunshin in the academy, he now created real clones with practiced ease of someone who has been doing so for years. No one can dismiss such great change of ability so easily, especially not Sasuke. While he was normally the one with the cool head in a fight or spar, that had changed when he fought Naruto. There was something about his manner that made him want to lose his temper and be on the offensive, to break that damnable mask of indifference he had seen plastered on Naruto since ever. Nobody else had disregarded him the way Naruto did. It was like a punch to his gut, and while he had disliked the attention and fawning he received before, he had grown used to it and thus was unaccustomed with Naruto's apathy. He challenged a few of his former classmates on the fly when he saw them training alone or together and instantly agreed, smitten by the fact that the Uchiha wanted to fight against them. He found himself comparing them to Naruto, and strictly speaking, their abilities were way inferior to the boy. Their punches were slower and lighter, their tactics predictable to a fault, and worst of all, he knew that they were deliberately holding back as though they wanted to curry his favor by appeasing to his ego. What difference does it make whether they tried their best or not? He still would defeat them regardless of ability. It was then he realized that he could not advance with such sycophants hounding after his heels. After a few of such matches, he decided that he preferred apathy to idol worship. A slight change to his routine, but it was one that he was willing to adapt to and grow stronger for it. Naruto offered sound advice whenever he chose to do so, never directly helping him or meddling in his business like some other people he knew. His taijutsu improved noticeably after one such occasion. Until he met Naruto, Sasuke never realized that one could equally hate and like a person at all. And that was what his feelings towards the boy were, a constant shift between like and hate. On one hand, his driving ambition of being the best still dominated his goals, and on the other, there was his slowly though growing desire to have someone he could be proud to call teammate, rival, and friend. He liked the way Naruto didn't butter up to him and fill his ears with trash, but he hated that piercing impassiveness that proclaimed to the world that everything was beneath him. Or so he told himself, because he knew that it was for another reason why he hated the boy. He would flinch slightly whenever Naruto turned his gaze onto him, because Sasuke would be reminded of Itachi and his terrible scarlet eyes. Though Naruto's were icy blue, he found little difference between the dissimilar parallels of cyclopean intensity. He shivered despite being warm, and somehow, Sasuke knew that things were going to be far from simple. This, Kakashi decided, was quiet. Except for the occasional high-pitched whine and grunt from Sakura and Sasuke respectively, there was no form of interaction whatsoever. While not as silent as the ones he had during his tour of duty, it was considered unnatural for a genin team to be so. Whatever his team was, Kakashi didn't have a word or phrase for it at the moment. He thought back to how his other compatriots had described their teams, and the phrase literally popped back into his head. They were antisocial, or if one was particularly snide, they were lacking the passionate flames of youth. Looking at them now, somewhat silent and obviously moping, Kakashi found himself agreeing. Instantly, he grimaced. That was something Guy would say. Though it was not by choice, Sasuke and Naruto were made so by circumstance. There was no chance of a cohesiveness that was built upon verbal communication. Nope, it was going to have to be built on trust, which was why he requested a C rank so soon. His thoughts shifted to the enigma of the group. He had learned of how Hitotsuki AI used substantial genjutsu to rip away all shreds of personality, consciousness, and intellect from a certain blonde and whiskered child. Naruto was, by all rights and logic, supposed to stay bedridden for the rest of his life. But by some sort of miracle, he had reconstructed his shattered mind within a matter of mere months. There had been no record of a human, ninja or otherwise, that had been capable of such acute healing. It was easy to assume that the Kyuubi had a hand in it all, and it was most likely true. The effects of the demon's work were quite hard to miss in any case. If the ethereal aura that Naruto exhibited at all times was any indication, it had been another reason to an already long list of why the old generation of Hyuga avoided the boy like the plague. He peeked out from the corner of his eye, regarding each of his pupils with a hint of concern. Out of the three, he had worried most about Sakura. She had no bloodline or clan that she could proudly call her own, nor did she possess any of the unique talents that other civilian-turned-shinobi seemed to have. It was funny that Sakura seemed to be the only one of her peers to able to feel the vibes that Naruto's aura gave off, especially when there were so many more sensitive and blood-gifted children than her who had failed to even catch a small whiff of the real terror lying underneath the calm and foreboding exterior. Kakashi considered the possibility of cosmic irony at that moment before snuffing it out with apathy. Irony or not, it was not his to enjoy, though he felt slightly pleased. His thoughts once more turned on the fidgety girl. Before, Sakura had ignored the palpable feeling of terror that emanated from the blonde by talking to Sasuke. At the moment, however, she had no such luxury. Through the silence, he could sense a bit of fear from the pink-haired girl, and every so often, she would give a discreet glance towards Naruto, who was trailing off a reasonable distance. Away with something akin to anxiety in her eyes, though exactly what, Kakashi could never tell. Fear appeared differently in another person's eyes, and this rule remained true. Kakashi pretended not to notice the girl giving the figure behind him a wary glance. Her apprehension was unfounded yet understandable. Her instincts were very accurate, though she would never know. How many genin had a demon vessel as their teammate? None, if the record is true that the other containers for the great demons had been slain at birth. If the Kyuubi indeed has possessed the boy, then it would fall to him to make the number of Jinchuriki go down once more. Ika in hand, he continued walking, ignoring the faint and wispy tendrils of hellish energy that only he could see. He had never stepped beyond the village gates till today. While there were many others who had never stepped outside their village considered it trivial, his first time outside meant so much more to him. He had read of how the plains of the Fire Country were the most beautiful among all of the countries. For the first time since forever, he felt free as he took in the sight of the wide expanse of grassland, with tall mountains and lush forests barely visible at the edge of the horizon. Trailing behind his team slightly, he admired the sight, committing the scene to memory as if he would never be able to see it again. A sudden gust blew past him, gently making the grassland sway to its tune. Naruto found himself lulled by it. "Pleasant, I assent it," a loud booming voice asked suddenly, awaking him from his state of semi-consciousness. "It is," he found himself agreeing, "better than Konoha." "It certainly is. I was beginning to tire of seeing the same things over and over again." Naruto didn't feel the need to answer, though he could feel the kyuubi leave his mind and settled into the pit of his stomach. He continued to take in his surroundings, unaware of the little glances that Sakura keeps giving him. There were no encounters of any kind, and by the time the sun had set and night had taken its place, Team 7 had covered a great deal of distance on their first day. Camp was set up, and soon, the 4 members of Team 7 were already sitting comfortably around a softly glowing campfire, their eyes set on the rations they had brought. Not surprisingly, everyone save Kakashi had a salted piece of sun-dried meat in between their hands. "Ugh," Sakura frowned, her face grimacing as the terrible taste sank into her tongue. "This is horrible." Mentally, Sakura vowed never to buy store-bought provisions anymore. She wasn't sure whether her tongue or stomach could last if she did. Sasuke just grunted, though everyone with half a brain could see him trying to fight off the horrible taste within his own mouth. Kakashi, being a veteran of many battles and campouts, gently admonished them before gleefully devouring his own sandwich of smoked, salted, and honey-glazed ham in a single motion too fast for them to see. Rule 15, a shinobi must be prepared for anything, he said in a sage-like manner, his mouth still munching on, which includes making sure that one's dinner is somewhat passable to your tongue. Both Sasuke and Sakura grumbled before biting off a chunk of their infinitely less superior dinner. They tried very hard not to wince when the thick flavor of salt and vinegar stung their tongues. "It is bland," Naruto suddenly said, and immediately, he found himself gathering the stares of his 2 teammates. "What?" Sasuke and Sakura glared at him. Naruto didn't take offense. Silently, both of them finished off their meat before retreating back to their respective tents to do whatever they needed to do. Kakashi has the first watch, though he promised with a hearty wink to his pupils that they would each have a turn later. Naruto just sat on his stump, eyes watching the fire. "How long more to our destination, sensei?" he asked, poking the red-hot embers with a stick. "We will reach Reykjavik in 4 days if we keep pace," Kakashi replied. Reykjavik was one of the more prominent trade towns situated on the heavily used roads and had prospered because of it. Naruto noted Kakashi's sudden note of distaste at the mention of the town. "You seem to be troubled, sensei," he said, his tone puzzled. "Is there something wrong?" Kakashi stared at him for a moment, both eye and body impassive. A perfect mimicry of the blonde if anyone bothered to compare. "You will find out when you get there," the Jounin assured before leisurely reading his book. The hours passed by quickly and soon it was dawn. Not quite refreshed by the night's rest, Team 7 continued on. It would take another day of walking to reach the closest settlement. The next few days brought them walking through one town after another. They were fairly large, their boundaries rivaling some of the larger central cities to the east. The streets packed with various shops and contractors, even though the town's primary purpose had been to serve stop points for the trade caravans that were passing by to and from Earth. Nights were spent with light conversation under a star-filled sky, despite Sakura's protestations against camping out. She was aghast when Kakashi first announced to them that they would pass through the settlement and not stay for the night. Though once he pointed out that a single room in the city inns for one night alone was the cost equivalent of a highly paid D rank, Sakura immediately shut up. It was to the great surprise of everyone else that Naruto had volunteered to cook for them. At first, the members of Team 7 were skeptical about the blonde's culinary skills, though that changed quickly once they savored the first bite. Who knew that Naruto had been capable of cooking up a scrumptious meal using what rations they had? Kakashi was now wondering how on earth the boy had managed to turn dry preserved meat into something even remotely tasty. Soon, the days got darker and the surroundings bleaker, with the grasslands giving way to dark and brooding forest paths. They were approaching their destination, and it was on the 4th day, as Kakashi predicted, that they entered the merchant settlement of Reykjavik. Thinking back to Kakashi's words 3 nights ago, he found himself understanding. To understand how Reykjavik was like, one really needed to go there before anything else. And if there is one word that Naruto would use to describe it, it had to be filthy. Unlike the previous towns, the streets were cluttered with rubbish, and the buildings looked as if they were neglected for years on end, with moss and cracks adorning the structures. Its inhabitants didn't look much better either, though they were more of a hostile disposition than a one of neglect. The atmosphere within the town was tense, with everybody looking over their shoulder every second or so. Quite used to the generally high standard of hygiene in Konoha, Sakura looked vaguely ill. Sasuke remained poker-faced, though he was just better at hiding it than others. Naruto was the only one who remained unchanged, though there was a small frown on his face rather than the looks of disgust that held sway on his teammates' faces. The town had seen better days, Naruto stated as if he was a resident. Kakashi wouldn't be surprised if Naruto had read about the town in a book. "Indeed it has," Kakashi said, voice bored and impartial to the pitiful scene, that is, until the arrival of the bandit group which had practically seized the town. "Almost all trade traffic between Earth and Fire must pass through here, and it has created a gold mine that no raider would ever want to give up willing. Suffice to say, the general population has suffered for it. Then our mission is? Sakura asked, though she still looked disgusted at the streets and the overall unpleasantness of the town in general. We locate the bandits and destroy whatever base they have been using to keep out of sight. Sources say that there is a known member who frequents the bar. We will tail him, Kakashi said. Tone bored. No combat necessary. Sneak in, plant a few explosive notes, get out. Simple really. A woman dressed in a dark and attractive dress stepped out from a building with neon signs, quite close to them. She caught sight of Sasuke and blew him a kiss. She laughed when she saw the blush on his cheeks. The woman walked away towards a group of similarly dressed congregation of women. All of them, Kakashi noted, were all attractive in more ways than one. The hookers seem to like you, Sasuke, Kakashi said cheerfully to a heavily scowling Sasuke as Sakura fumed in the background. Just don't be too attached to them. Sasuke felt no greater urge to kill Kakashi than in that moment. Preferably consisting of rope, several kunai, and that infernal orange book of his. As if he could read minds, Kakashi immediately said, just kidding now. You don't need to glare that badly at me. Sasuke stopped his glares and switched back to his scowling. I suggest we move on, he said, ignoring the boy. Our target should be around here somewhere. He walked off into the streets and his team followed. It took the better part of the day, but Team 7 had found their man, an experience that none of Team 7 wished to repeat in the near future. Kakashi immediately used a genjutsu on the target when it had been most convenient to. Now, they were following the hypnotized bandit through the thick and dark foliage. Since he was not ninja and under a genjutsu, the trek was significantly longer than what they had expected. Evening was well into effect, and the sun shone its last rays for the day before disappearing once more into the horizon. They followed the man through the thick forest, darkness hounding their heels with every passing moment. But shinobi were born of the night and thus weren't deterred in their efforts at stalking their prey. The man stopped at a clearing for no apparent reason. Team 7 was confused. Was this it? All of them thought. They didn't have to wait long to find out. Shuriken peppered themselves into the trees that they were hiding behind. They had been spotted. The voice belonged to Sakura, who screamed as she was carried away by somebody. By the time they had realized that, her voice was a faint whisper upon the wind. Naruto, go after her. Leave a cage bunchen behind. Kakashi ordered. The boy nodded and disappeared into the woods. Without so much a blink, Kakashi threw a kunai at the bushes, a low thud and poof signifying a hit. Silence reigned before the first plods of footsteps reached their ears. Looking around, they saw that mud clones, faceless and entirely composed of mire, starting to surround them. Kakashi gave a quick nod to Sasuke's inquiring glance and proceeded to mow down the approaching mass with a Katen technique. Set on fire, the clones slowed and eventually dissolved, lifeless. Kakashi noticed that two shapes were slipping away in different directions. Sasuke seemed to have the same thoughts. You chase after him, he pointed to the one fast moving towards the east. I will catch up with you later. Sasuke nodded and disappeared with the Naruto clone in tow. He stopped at a clearing 5 minutes later, trying to find out where his target had gone to. Was it him or had it just grown darker? Sasuke asked himself as he scanned his new surroundings with caution. Naruto's clone was nowhere in sight, which didn't matter regardless. What good would a single clone do anyway? He frowned as he noticed a nearby tree distort and convulse. Ripples which shouldn't be existing in the first place were beginning to appear and disappear erratic. Was it genjutsu? Kunai in hand, he lightly grazed his arm, pressing hard enough to draw a faint trickle of blood. The pain jolted him, and everything which had been dulled and shady before was illuminated in stark clarity. Uchiha eyes were better suited to the night. There was a rustle to his left and Sasuke threw his kunai in that direction. Laughter echoed all around before it localized into one singular point. Out from the shadows came a figure, tall, bulky, and most definitely male. There was nothing special about him save for a hidden stone hit at 8 which dangled from his belt. Little boy, the man no, shinobi purred, let's play. Sasuke snarled. Nobody called him little. Ever. Anger dictating his actions, Sasuke charged forward, his hands diving into a weapon pouch before popping back out again to fling several star-shaped projectiles at the man. They embedded themselves deep within his flesh with a wet thud, surprise and shock plastered on the man's features before a poof of smoke revealed his target to be a tree trunk. His smugness turned into a scowl. That worthless Nukenin pulled a Kawamiri on him. His skin tingled with a sudden itch and immediately he leapt to the side. Amatai Jinkatsu no Jutsu. The shinobi spiraled downwards, aiming to crush Sasuke. He missed, the attack sending large amounts of dirt and dust into the air. Even from afar, Sasuke could feel the sheer force that was behind the punch. The smoke and dust cleared, but the enemy was nowhere in sight. It was then, in a brief moment of distraction on Sasuke's part, that the shinobi flickered into existence in front of him, a kunai held high up preparing to strike downwards into his chest. But Sasuke had finished the last of his hand seals by then and promptly slammed his hands downwards. Daten, Yuyuan Ueba no Jutsu. Dozens of spikes erupted from the ground, fueled by a vehemence that almost seemed alive. The stone ninja leapt back in rapid succession, racing against time as the spikes continued to home in onto him, each second akin to another step towards death. He retaliated with a Daten technique of his own, slamming his fist into an area that was free from the unnaturally sharp spikes. To Sasuke's great horror, the spikes, which were doing a fine job of pushing back the Nukenin, were stopped in its tracks even though he kept pumping chakra through his hands. Tisk, tisk, the missing nin chastised, his hands wiping off the sweat from his face before he smirked at Sasuke. You almost got me there. Children shouldn't be playing with such dangerous toys. Having exhausted most, if not all, of his chakra in that last-ditch attempt, Sasuke knew that he had to finish the fight soon or else. Strangely enough, he found himself thinking back to Kakashi's reasoning on Daten usage. His words echoed clearly in that uniquely bored monotone of his. Despite its inherent usefulness, Daten techniques require an extensive and horrible amount of chakra to maintain. And if you're not careful, you may find yourself out before you know it. He knew better now. Without any warning, clones sprung up through the ground, their arms and legs gripping and twisting the surprised Nukenin with startling alacrity amid the blinding debris and dust. Sasuke felt the pace of his heart quicken in shock before he forced it into a relative calm once more. He stood dazed for a moment or two before he felt a deep chill go down his spine. The clones were staring at him. Sasuke laughed mirthlessly before shaking off his lightheadedness. Even as a clone, Naruto still managed to remind him of Itachi. His hands hesitated for less than a second at what he was about to do. Having already lost his innocence, he performed the hand seals and shouted out the words, Taten, Gaokakyu no Jutsu. Oddly enough, the screams never once affected him. When Sasuke had gone on ahead, he summoned up his nin dogs and followed their lead. Soon, he reached the main encampment, filled with thugs armed with various weapons, all of them apparently waiting for him. One, however, stood out from the rest. All it took was a quick glance at the deep scratch on the man's hideite to confirm his suspicions. The enemy had ninja, missing nin, obviously in a large number of thugs. 24 or so, in his case it seemed. The mission was no longer a medium-level C rank. Now, at the very least, it was a B rank, which was fine by him. A small part of his mind began nagging at him about the safety of his students, who were still out there somewhere alone and defenseless. In a great sense of cosmic irony, a bright orange light suddenly erupted from the distance, and the ear-shattering scream that followed moments later made that part of him shut up. If Sasuke could hold his own for now, then so could Naruto, Kakashi reasoned. The fight lasted no more than half a minute, ending rather anticlimactically when his hand finally lost its veil of ivory-turned crimson chakra which had, just a moment ago, ripped through his opponent's heart and left lung like wet paper. Strangely enough, the blood of his enemy sizzled and fused with his technique instead of just being assimilated without alteration. It was, Kakashi thought with a great amount of macabre amusement, a nice deviation from the norm. The remaining thugs, after seeing their boss get off with relative ease, fled into the woods. Kakashi watched them go. Running wouldn't do much for them, especially against a ninja. Let them believe it would. Idly, he formed a seal with his clean and yet stained hands, creating a dozen or so copies of himself. Without blinking, they disappeared into the woods and soon, the sounds of steel clashing against steel and the groans of the dying reached his ears. Of course, none of it bothered him. He had been doing this for more than a decade, after all. It was nothing new to him. Then, a thought occurred to him and he suddenly found himself more worried about the shattered pieces of innocence that he was going to pick up sooner or later than the still present sounds of dying men. He caught up to them, after the Nukenin realized that he could not win against a contest of speed. Naruto felt the chakra link between his clones and him dissipate, the drain of maintaining them no longer a burden on him. They had served their purpose. From the corner of his eye, he saw Sakura just by the tree not too far away. Her jade eyes glazed and dulled. Genjutsu, he thought. They started fighting soon after that. It eventually stretched on, with Naruto using his knowledge to avoid being skewered at every turn while the other shinobi kept up his high-tempo attacks. Both knew that whoever gets the first hit in will win. There was no illusion or glamour over that reality and Naruto knew. He was beginning to tire even though his body was still pumped up with chakra after using what seemed like dozens of Kage Bunshin. In a desperate move, the other shinobi charged, hands enveloped with a sickly green chakra. Everything was going so fast, too fast and brief to comprehend before it whisked away from his grasp. Time stilled, and the last revelation revealed itself, long enough for him to realize one thing. He was going to die. Something within him snapped, and he moved. The ground cracked as he stepped away at the last instant. The Nukenin, too surprised by the act, failed to notice the blazing fist of crimson was closing onto him. He coughed up blood, looking down to see an arm through his chest, precious liquid life flowing down in endless streams from his body. With one gurgle, the shinobi became limp and silent. The hellish energy aura around them faded from sight, and Naruto removed his hand from the body, the corpse dropping to the ground without so much a protest. The realization and implications of what he just did started to sink in. He killed for the first time. Naruto stared at his bloodied hand, fascinated as blood that was not his slowly trickled down the back of his palm. He made a mental note to scrub his hands until he couldn't see the blood once he got home. He felt dirty. He trembled as the brisk and cool evening breeze left as it passed and caressed him. You made your first kill, you should be proud, I suppose. For some reason or the other, the words felt hollow to him. He did not feel proud in any way whatsoever. Tired, he walked over to the unconscious Sakura who chose that moment to wake up. Naruto, not quite drenched in blood but enough to make a person sick and presently reeking of terror and fear, was the last thing that Sakura needed or wanted to see, especially with her empathic abilities. She trembled uncontrollably as though she could see the faint outline of pure malice that shrouded his form at all times. "Get away from me," she shrieked, grabbing a fallen kunai that was nearby. He took one more step closer before a wet thud reached his ears. A kunai was lodged in his arm, thrown by a shaky hand of a terrified girl. He pulled it out, feeling a sharp sting as he did before the wound closed. Naruto was confused. He had done no harm to her and yet she fears him. "I mean no harm." He took another step. "Go away," she whispered this time, though its loudness was on par to her previous outburst, shuddering from the waves of terror that radiated from him. This time, he stopped, somehow knowing that Sakura would do more than just throw kunai at him if he did otherwise. "I will go get Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said hesitantly, watching as Sakura rocked herself forward and backwards, arms holding her legs as she mumbled incoherently to herself. Unsure of his choice to leave the girl alone and vulnerable, he created a cage bunshin and made it transform into Sasuke. He observed that Sakura was more at ease with him than with anybody else. Upon seeing Sasuke, Sakura leapt up and rushed towards the clone, embracing it tightly as she proceeded to cry on its shoulder. Awkwardly, the clone tried to soothe the girl by rubbing her back to no avail. Naruto gave them one last look before he ventured off to find the others. A few Q&A before I begin ranting. For those wondering about Naruto's little demonstration in the Hokage's office, yes, he gets to use it later in the story. And about Hinata's sudden affection for our favorite blonde ninja, I'm planning to include a side story about that. Though I can safely say that her infatuation with Naruto in the fic isn't as bad as the one she has in the anime. And, once more, on beta ed. Possible errors for both punctuation and scripting. My apologies for my lateness, though blaming it on school would at least give me some sense of comfort in that my tardiness was strictly due to external factors. Length and content-wise, this is one of the harder chapters for me to get the steam going due to the fact that I'm deviating from canon timeline at this point. This also increases the length and hence the publishing time since I feel the need to explain, characterize, dramatize in the parts where I use my ideas. Still, I feel that this chapter was rushed, especially with the way I handled the fight scenes, so I may come back to redo them. I will try to update at least once a week because from now, it's going to go according to the canon timeline unless I see fit and feasible to add another side story. I'm also wowed by the amount of reviews that Chapter 5 has gotten. Thank you to all who have left behind a comment, other tips and the like. It means a lot. A lot of killing in this chapter, as you have been warned before, so no flames or anything about Naruto and Sasuke killing so soon. Remember, they are ninja, so there's no avoiding that aspect of their life. Hopefully this chapter meets your expectations, though I feel that I have neglected the city parts of the story. Writer's block notwithstanding, I think I have made the right decision to purchase my Naruto Time at Hero 3 for my PS2 console, since it provides all sorts of inspiration to the jutsus I'm going to have Team 7 learn. Feel free to ask any questions and I will do my best to answer them. Once again, please leave a review or comment, because they help me to write better. Blah denotes speech. Blah denotes sound. Blah denotes thoughts. Blah denotes demon talking. Note, rereading the previous chapter, I think I made Naruto be apathetic to his first kill. It's not intentional and I hope to resolve it in this chapter. Added note, this is the last of the filler arc, so it may be crappy. Their mission complete, Team 7 journeyed back to Konoha. It was a success, though none of them came back completely unchanged. Sasuke looked the same as always, his face still fixated into a permanent scowl, though there was a touch of marring distraction if one knew where to look for it. Out of the three, Sakura seemed to be the worst one off, her hands hugging herself constantly as if to fight off a chill that no one else felt, her mind struggling to throw off the after effects of the genjutsu that was placed on her. At the behest of the looks that Kakashi was throwing her, she said that she was fine, though with the way that her body keeps shaking and shuddering, none of the others had believed her. It takes a near fall to convince her to hitch a ride on the back of a black and featureless cage bunshin, courtesy of Kakashi. The days spent on the road passed relatively quickly and soon Naruto found himself in front of Ikikaru's, just in time for the dinner special, dusk already settling on the village. Having been dismissed by Kakashi, he found himself unwilling to go home just yet, despite being deadbeat tired. He could still see the blood on his hands every other moment or so, even though he had rubbed his hands raw just days before. The phantom stain just refused to go away, like the horrible feeling that had begun to swell in his bosom. His mind troubled, he was about to enter the ramen stand before a shout stopped him in his tracks. "Ugh, Naruto." Uruka popped his head out from the corner of the street, hands apparently busy with a grocery bag. "How's the mission?" Then, he noticed Naruto's hands, throbbing and so very red. What happened? These look like... Naruto just stared blankly. "I couldn't get the blood off." Uruka looked incredulous for a second before it was immediately wiped away when he saw the very red but unbloodied hands. "But Naruto, there isn't anything on your hands." "Yes, there is," he assured the man, his voice hinting frustration. "I can see it now." Uruka stayed silent before he tentatively opened his mouth once more. "Naruto... did you do something that you didn't wish you did?" The boy looked away, frowning at something that only he could see. "Think I did. I don't know." Naruto had an odd way of saying things sometimes, but the meaning had been clear. He had killed for the first time, that much Uruka could glean from him. There was only so much that he could teach and never would prepare his students for that one irrevocable moment in their life as a shinobi. Haruka could sympathize. He too felt that gut-wrenching twist on his first time, and that was when he decided that the role of a teacher would be suited for him. Seeing the light go out in a person's eyes was horrible. Knowing it was you who was responsible for it was worse. But to do it on an almost regular basis, that was soul-rending. He had seen friends ending up in the isolate special wards below the hospital, and it wasn't pleasant. He chided himself, for one shouldn't dwell on such thoughts. He turned his attention onto Naruto, who was looking down on the ground, apparently finding it very interesting. "Does that make me a monster, Haruka-sensei?" he said, though it might as well have been a whisper with its softness. And no, the teacher tried to reassure the boy, of course not. Liar, he thought, but didn't say it out. Finding himself robbed of his desire to eat, he bid Haruka a good night and walked away, leaving him in the same stumped manner he had week before. He dreamt a dream of obsidian black, and like many others he had dreamt before, he was alone in the vast emptiness. He had read of how dreams were filled with vibrant colors and some semblance of familiarity of the real world, no matter how strange and bizarre they may be. But for as long as he could remember, not once did he have such a dream, and the world of dreams tended to be monotone in its vivacity, with the darkness always encroaching but never fully embracing him. He waited until a ball of red flame burst out, adding to the blackness a shade of color that wasn't there before. "You're troubled." He could hear the annoyance in the demon's voice. "I killed someone. How can I not be? It was one measly human life, boy. But I thought all life was sacred. I remembered that you saved my life once, when I was not a child." He still remembers that day, and how utterly terrified he had been. That feeling never returned since, and he was grateful. "That was different, Kit. I was looking out for myself. Nothing more. End of discussion." He blinked. "I don't want to kill anymore. Do you cherish the freedom you have now?" The question was imposing. Yes, of course. Naruto was confused at what the Kyuubi was hinting at. It often spoke in riddles that he wished he could understand. "Then, would you prefer to rot in that cell?" "What? It is simple. You're a shinobi. A tool to kill if need be. The spilling of blood can be avoided, but hesitating will do you no good either. How much you spill depends on you, in the end. I don't have to like it. USHOULD, though I did prefer if you did." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "Think about it, and make your choice." With that, the great demon left him alone in the void, his consciousness slowly slipping away as he fell into a deep sleep. Out of the three, he acknowledged that Naruto was the least likely to show up after the mission. Sasuke just grunted when asked about his welfare, while he ascertained that the little Genjutsu surprise didn't mentally damage Sakura, who was as of now very fidgety, very suspicious behavior for a girl who he expected to ogle at the effeminate Ucha at every possible moment. Still, knowing about it and experiencing it was entirely two different things altogether. "Excuse me, I would not be attending training today. My apologies." Naruto did a little bow in front of Kakashi. He didn't buy it. "Hey, just wait," he said, bringing his gloved hand to grab the boy. But before any of them could react, Naruto exploded into a plume of smoke. Figures, using a cage bunshin as his messenger. Kakashi muttered under his breath, before he brightened up, "Oh well, I will check up on him later." He turned to regard his two students, mentally noting that Sakura was still very fidgety, though it was coupled with discreet glances and jerky motions. From all accounts and experience, her body language practically screamed her desire to ask him something. Whatever it was, however, was purely speculation up to this point, not that he had a foggiest clue as to what it was. He made a note to talk to the girl once the session was over. But for now, even though he was short of one student, he wasn't about to let the rest cut any slack. Their recent mission showed how ill-prepared they were for anything more than D-rank mission parameters, although technically they had fared exceedingly well for a team who had only recently been clocking in a dozen or so D-ranks. Hell, he even felt a small burst of pride in his chest as his team, had been able to complete a B rank just after 2.5 weeks of training. The thought was very gratifying, to say the least. Incidentally, he now knew how Guy felt when his team did something that was to be proud of. The thought lasted for a brief moment before Kakashi realized he had just understood Guy of all people, and promptly felt the goosebumps rippling over his arms. Best to forget that ever happened. Smiling, he summoned up 3 clones of himself and proceeded to educate his students in the ways of taijutsu. They saw a malevolent glint pass through Kakashi's single eye, making both of them shudder for the briefest span of a moment. True to this, the training session was frankly one of the most tiring and rigorous of all she had gone through. Sasuke was actually panting by the end of it, though she wasn't any much better off herself. She was grateful that in her state of physical exhaustion, she conveniently forgot about what she had wanted to ask from her sensei. Until yesterday, Sakura never fully appreciated the thought that while in Konoha, your safety was at least ensured. Genjutsu, it seemed, was way more personal than the simple and yet effective Katen technique. The irony was that while a Katen technique could melt the flesh off your bones and kill you in the process, Genjutsu made certain that you can feel the same amount of agony while being consciously aware that you were still alive and there was more yet to come. It was capable of making liquid fear sink into your very being and rendered almost every moment awake into excruciating agony. 1,000 times more efficient than ninjutsu due to the fact that while the will of a shinobi could resist the pain of the body, very few were unaffected by the discrete ravages that genjutsu leaves. Once was enough, and she never wanted to experience it again. and if the only way to avoid being a plaything for such frivolous, she would gladly learn the art, even though she had reason enough to detest it. But somehow, despite all her conviction, she lacked the courage to ask for the training. She lingered on a bit after he had dismissed them, conflicted as to whether to run away or pluck up her courage and ask. The former seemed very appealing right now, but before she could act on the impulse, a voice stopped her. Sakura. The girl in question stiffened in response. Don't you have something to say? At this, Sakura widened her eyes. How did he know? Seeing the shocked expression on her face, he explained. You were fidgety all this while. It's quite hard not to notice that you had something on your mind. Hey, she was hesitant, but she fought it down, driving it back to the pit of her stomach. I want to learn Genjutsu. Oh, Kakashi propped a palm under his chin in a manner which screamed boredom and light amusement. She had a feeling that he did this when he wanted to be serious. Please tell me why. Sakura was silent for a while before finally speaking. I hate being weak, she declared softly, struggling to allow herself this moment of truthfulness to last. When I was caught in that Genjutsu, it made me feel things that made me wish that I was strong not to go through it. She gave herself a depreciating laugh. It changed me in a way, I suppose, because I now cannot bear to look at myself in the mirror. She grimaced slightly before continuing. I never want to feel that again. Kakashi cut her off with a gentle wave. Well, I was going to teach you the basics sooner or later, he sighed, bringing his hands to his side, but since you've the motivation, I guess now would be a good time as any. At his words, Sakura perked up, the gloom in her eyes almost vanishing. Kakashi wordlessly performed a few hand seals, and almost immediately, a bowl of steaming hot ramen appeared over the tree stump nearby. Sakura nearly jumped in surprise, and was now eyeing the recent apparition of noodle soup with great apprehension. There was a snap and the bowl disappeared from her sight just as fast as it had appeared. She blinked. What the hell just happened? She turned towards Kakashi, who was looking the same as he always had, bored. That was Seishin Kuchai, he said in that monotone of his that made him notorious throughout the social circles of the village, one of the 3 basic illusionary techniques that are the foundation of all Genjutsu. It is relatively simple to use, and as you have seen before, tricks people into seeing what isn't there in the first place. Think of anything, and I do mean anything, and people will think that they see it. The hand seals are bird, boar, dog, sheep and bird. Hold it as long as possible. She nodded, before performing the hand seals herself, albeit at a slower rate than what her teacher had demonstrated before. Focusing her mind, she tried to conjure up an image of a fan. Her illusion did not immediately materialize like Kakashi's, but the object began flickering into existence, which was a success in her eyes. Straining herself, she pumped and directed more chakra into her surroundings and the projection, striving to achieve a balance between the two. Too little into her projection, and the illusion would crumble, but too much would only serve to distort the image. It remained solid, looking real enough for anyone caught in her illusion to notice. It was slow at first, but gradually, she felt her body grow uncomfortably tense and feverish. She persevered on though, maintaining the illusion. By the end of it, she was panting heavily, beads of sweat starting to glisten on her forehead. Having reached her limit, she released the illusion as she fell down on the soft grass, the illusionary fan crumbling into wispy strands of bright blue chakra that faded into the wind. As I expected, she flinched at Kakashi's unconcerned tone. After all, it was her skills that he was dismissing, even though he had that right as her teacher. Her features turned bitter, angry at herself and at her sensei for being so apathetic. Kakashi wasn't even in the least fazed, and it hit her hard how far she was from his level. You realize that even with all the chakra exercises you've done, your reserves are just enough for one basic technique. The way he said it was not insulting, but it was, however, the painful truth, no matter how much she wanted to deny it. Why, I thought that out of everything, Genjutsu needed the least chakra to use. She was annoyed at this point, seeing that her sensei overlooked such a basic fact. True, he nodded, but that is only the case when the user has a finely honed control of chakra, or else I'm afraid that Genjutsu can use as much chakra as ninjutsu if one isn't careful. Sakura stayed silent at that. I must admit though, not many people can perform what you've done today, Kakashi said, and she felt a flare of pride in her chest. You've potential, he added somewhat lazily, though that doesn't mean that you can have it easy because of it. And to be honest, learning ninjutsu is going to be more beneficial in the long run. It is up to you in the end though. I want to learn Genjutsu, she curtly cut in, before she hastily added in, please. She couldn't see him smile, but she was sure he did. Well, just let me finish, he cleared his throat. Genjutsu is a subtle art, its secrets lying beneath its many hidden nuances waiting to be discovered. True, it does not suffer from the physical limitations that plague ninjutsu and taijutsu, but that is both its strength and failing. Skilled masters can weave spells that can enthrall and kill at a whim. That is the power of illusions, but it requires your full and undivided attention, and even then, its benefits are not seen immediately. I will not lie to you, Sakura, many a shinobi had taken Genjutsu only to drop out halfway through. That is the difficulty of the art. I will not blame you if you choose to reconsider. Sakura remained silent. She knew beforehand all of those facts, and she didn't let them deter her. So I will ask you once more, he said slowly, is that your choice? Genjutsu, she said once more, allowing a tinge of annoyance creep into her voice. Are you prepared to follow what I say, no matter how absurd and ridiculous they are? His tone was grim and serious, and Sakura had no doubt that he wasn't joking. Yes, she replied in a heartbeat, barely feeling the gravity of her choice. Good. He smiled and tension eased away. We will begin your training tomorrow. She slumped in almost palpable relief at his words. The fire and drive that fueled her minutes before dissolved once her task was completed. Sakura. Yes. She tensed, hands clenching the fabric of semi-skirt nervously. Give Naruto a chance. He was the one to help you out, you know. She faltered for a second, feeling guilty. Although she was terrified of the boy, she couldn't help but feel ashamed at the way she treated him, even though he did nothing to earn her scorn. I will try. When Kakashi found Naruto idling in his flat of scrolls and books, he was prepared for anything. Anything. People he worked with for years snapped under the pressure of killing. He barely knew Naruto for a month, who for all intents and purposes, could be a mini Orochimaru in the making, with the power of the Kyuubi to boot. The child was backed by the Sandaime himself, but what guarantee did his word have if this child snapped? You didn't come to training today, he began conversationally. Naruto turned his head ponderously. His eyes were blank before a spark of recognition flashed through them. Sensei, Naruto greeted, getting up. Do you want some tea? No, he said, shaking his head, my visit will be short. An uncomfortable silence reigned between the two before Naruto spoke. Must shinobi always kill? It depends, sometimes it becomes necessary. The boy was silent for a moment. Always then. I'm not saying that you need to kill everybody, only when it's necessary. What about the people before? Naruto asked. Kakashi knew he was referring to the dead bodies he found on the forest, bleeding and so very dead. They could have ran, but they didn't and they've paid for it. I see. Naruto, you've to remember we are tools, a weapon for our clients to wield. We cannot afford to have emotions or else we will go insane. I do not like it, the boy said. You must, or at least, try, he urged, voice turning forceful. If Naruto was angry, he didn't show it. Think of it as protecting your precious people, the man said at last. If you do not do it, they will die. It is a simple choice. You're a sword and a shield. Remember that every time. He was silent for a bit before he spoke once more. I will keep that in mind. Thank you. Satisfied with his answer, Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving the boy to his own devices. The next day came and Kakashi found himself with all of his students present. He was pleased to see that Naruto took him advice. Seeing that all of you've learned enough of the basics, I thought that it might be good to try something different today. Biting into his thumb, he spread it across a scroll he had opened the second before. 2 scrolls appeared in his hands with a small amount of smoke. Rolling in the summoning scroll and tucking it back into his vest pockets in one hand, he tossed the 2 at the boys who caught them gracefully. These are the last jutsu I'm going to give you as genin. Master them by this week. After that, you will have to develop your own techniques after this. Of course, I will be able to help you if you need it. It was for formality's sake as he knew that Sasuke would rather die than openly ask for help. Naruto, on the other hand, well, nothing needed to be said about him. Though to the other training fields, one preferably far away from here. He made a little shooing motion with his hands, and Sasuke looked sour at being dismissed so degradingly. I will see you guys later. When they both sprinted away, Kakashi turned towards the girl who was very confused. Why send them away? She could help but ask her eccentric teacher. They would just get in the way, he replied with nonchalance. Besides, there's no need for me to supervise them yet anyways. Leaves me more time to focus on you. Why? Now, he smiled innocently, before unveiling a whole stack of books under the guise of a tree trunk, the genjutsu glittering prettily as it was dispelled. The first rule of genjutsu is to never get caught in another's illusion. The irony was not lost on the girl, seeing that she broke that rule, though the circumstances of that were unfair towards her. Sakura reckoned that it was another one of her teacher's strange quirks to not so subtly remind people of their own level of proficiency while being arrogantly assured of his. However, he was still her teacher and she let the barb slide. No point in wasting time being annoyed at a person who has no sense of thoughtfulness, she supposed. But, he waggled a finger at her, if you do get caught, never fear. That's what the Kai technique is for. Of course, there's another way, though I doubt you want to bite your lip every time you happen to get stuck in genjutsu. He formed up his fingers into a simple array, left hand over the right, with the index finger pointing up. Very suspicious that her teacher had already placed an illusion on her, she quickly copied the array, hands positioned exactly as Kakashi's. Nothing happened. You're quick to act, commendable though your objective is that. He pointed to the respectable stack of books. It didn't take her long to find out why. She blinked when one of the books shimmered, its edges sparking angrily before calmly settling. Kakashi's crinkled eye of amusement did not do anything to help still her stomach. I placed genjutsu on those, and it is up to you to disarm them. His tone was insidiously cheerful, and it was at that point she wondered whether her sensei was a sadist. After a moment of consideration, she came to the conclusion that he was. Something told her that she was in for a ride. Trying to find Naruto after training had been a surprisingly difficult task. By the time the session ended, she felt so woozy that she could barely even walk. Kakashi's damnable illusions kept making her vision blurry. Though she managed to learn how to counter and disarm illusions by the end of it, she wanted to strangle Kakashi for the massive migraine he had given her. She finally came upon him practicing a Katen technique of sorts, embers of light hovering around him in a protective manner before rushing to explode on the bark of a nearby tree. He seemed to be fully immersed in concentration. The aura of menace and terror was barely discernible to her now, though she knew that it was lurking around. Sakura knew that she should be grateful, knew in her gut that she should be. But for the life of her, her words of gratitude died whenever she saw him before. Fear was something that she associated with her mother when she had first told her that she was becoming a shinobi, and it was also the first time her mother stopped yelling at her, which was 100 times worse when she did. The life of a geisha was not for her, she had said then, and neither was the life of a shinobi now that she thought about it. Gathering her courage, she walked towards Naruto, who was now sitting under a tree, eyes closed and hands folded. After all, she promised Kakashi-sensei that she would try, right? Haruno-san, his voice pierced through the silence. Do you have any business with me? At his question, Sakura fidgeted nervously. I just wanted to say thank you for saving me. He blinked, something that she didn't expect him to do. It was nothing. With that, he turned away, his eyes concentrating on his hands as they shifted from one seal to another. She felt anger at his apparent disinterest. Was her life so meaningless to him? It was a simmering anger, one that had accumulated from a few days, one that was directed at him for causing her so much fear and terror without her actually knowing why. It reached the critical at that moment. Will you stop being so damn calm about it? She shouted. I'm sick of you having that damn unmovable mask that you call a face. There was a brief spark from his aura at her words, but she held on. His next words took the anger out from her, though there was still a good deal left simmering. I do not understand what you're saying. What? Your anger? I do not understand it, he said quietly, nor do I understand why you're so upset with me. I said, you misunderstand me, he said once more. I cannot understand what you feel. Only through your actions do I know. The air around him rumbled with a low growl and she trembled. There was an uncomfortable pause. You fear me. It wasn't a question. And Sakura felt very cold as his words hit their mark. Why? Composing herself, there is something about you that is disconcerting. I do not know whether it is you or something else, but I know there is something wrong with you. I can feel it in my skin. People fear what they cannot understand. I'm no exception, he said, and if you wish to understand me to get rid of your fear, I'm not adverse to the offer, if that is your wish. Sakura seemed shocked at his words, her eyes disbelieving. Yes, it wasn't until his voice shaken her from her thoughts that she realized that he was still waiting for her reply. Well, she mumbled awkwardly, feeling very stupid on her part, if you put it that way. I guess I will accept. He smiled brightly, perhaps for the first time she had ever known him, and the tension dissipated, the unsettling pressure along with it. Sakura realized that maybe this wasn't such a bad thing after all. A week passed quickly, and Sakura, Kakashi noted with great sadness, was improving greatly in terms of her illusion training, so much that his traps were ineffective. Still, it was fun while it lasted. She still hasn't managed to make him use one of his more advanced techniques, but that was fine. Most genjutsu users took a year or more to be able to form anything substantial. Naruto, it seemed, was helping his pupil. It wasn't much, but he suspected that she would not have made this much progress if not for the boy. They were all progressing to some point, all of his charges displaying some semblance of teamwork during his training sessions. He doubted that anyone else except him would feel a small prick of satisfaction if their student started spitting giant balls of fire at him simultaneously. Still, they were fitting in quite nicely into the cog that was called teamwork. Quite confident that his team was ready, he appealed for another C rank. This time he made sure that he, and by extension, his team, wouldn't get screwed over like the last time. So when they got another C rank in the form of escorting a bridge-building drunk from fire to wave, he wasn't really surprised. Blah denotes speech. Blah denotes sound. Blah denotes thoughts. Blah denotes demon talking. Note, many thanks to really bad fanfiction for pointing out an error. Fixed. After having made introductions to their client, a red-faced bridge builder by the name of Tezuna who, judging from the sake bottle present in his hand during the introduction, was probably on his way to the wretched land of drunkenness. Team 7 were promptly dismissed from Hawkage Tower, having been given the rest of the day off in preparation for their trip. The Hawkage assured them that it was a simple escort duty, nothing too dangerous unlike their last high-profile mission. Incidentally, Tezuna was fidgeting an awful lot when the Sandaime said this, but all who were present merely passed it off as drunkenness. At the entrance, Sasuke merely muttered a goodbye to the both of them while Kakashi had already disappeared off to who knows where. Sakura waved goodbyes to them energetically, as if making up for both his and Sasuke's lack of gutso. The girl was much more open with him now than ever, a consequence of the shared lessons he had been giving her to improve her genjutsu in exchange for sorely needed chakra control lessons. This new sense of openness was not unwelcome, however, and he found it to be pleasant, if not difficult at times. Both of them were mutually satisfied with the results. Shuffling home, Uzumaki Naruto retrieved his rather worn but usable backpack before methodically filling it with spare clothes and items that he thought that could be of some use, which were mostly medicines that he concocted fairly recently during his free time. By the end of it, it was only half full, though he didn't see any need to pack any more. There was nothing else left for him to do now, save wait for dusk to come, but he did not relish the idea of wasting time. And so, he wandered out towards the outskirts of the village. It was late afternoon, when the sky was dyed amber by the setting sun, that Naruto found himself standing at the hill where the sky was most visible for all to see. Spread out on the soft patches of grass, two boys, one who was bulky with messy dark red hair, the other possessing a scrawny physique with equally rough hair, were cloud watching. There was a shogi board, along with a respectable amount of snacks, located quite near to the duo. As if alerted to his presence by the change in wind, the pineapple-haired boy turned, immediately noticing the newcomer. "Hey, Naruto," Shikamaru called over, "didn't see you for quite some time, you know. Wanna play?" He gestured towards the board with his thumb enthusiastically, while the portly boy next to him only shook his head with mock admonishment. "Hello, Naruto," Chouji greeted, before helping himself to a new bag of chips. Shikamaru here was getting impatient for a rematch, you know. He thrashed Asuma-sensei totally today. The boy in question merely ignored the comment, hastily setting up the pieces while Naruto gave a thin smile of amusement. The only way to galvanize Shikamaru into activity was to mention shogi. It was like him and his books, really. Seating himself, Naruto made the first move. Time passed and the birth of dusk came once again, and the trio parted ways from the Hill of Clouds, silently agreeing to meet whenever viable. Shikamaru lost again, much to his displeasure. Team 7 left the gates of Konoha the minute they were opened at the crack of dawn. All of them had packed light, intending to reach Wave by nightfall via the river systems. With a little bit of luck, they might even manage to make it by late afternoon if everything went smoothly. The three genin were walking in front of Tazuna, with Kakashi taking up the rear. Sasuke was quiet, as usual, his eyes dark and alert for anything that might be out of place. He wasn't going to take any chances considering the last time they had received a supposedly safe C-ranked mission. With Sasuke taking up the role of sentry for their little stroll, Sakura and Naruto found themselves with what was apparently free training time. So when Naruto suggested a use of it, she was skeptical. And she had every right to be. After all, her teammate had just volunteered to act as a metaphorical punching bag. For the past few days, the blonde had helped her immensely in training, pointing out things that were otherwise too abstract for her analytic mind to pick up right away. Sakura tentatively cast the illusion that showed bowls of piping hot ramen. She took care in her weaving, because she knew that placing too many illusions in such a short span of time would be disastrous to those on the receiving end. However, her worry was unfounded. The illusion didn't even reach him, the chakra line that allowed her to control the illusion having been cut almost instantly the second she touched his mind. "Try harder," the boy said without spite or ridicule. She nodded once. During their joint training sessions, she had gotten used to the soft monotone of his voice, which she had once thought of as grating, though now she considered it bearable. It was particularly frustrating, however, when he guided her with words that were supposed to bear encouragement instead of apathy, even if he did not mean it. Dropping all her precaution, she did what she was told, for she could not stop the feeling of inferiority that surged through her whenever he said those two words. When Kakashi started to see floating trays of dango in front of him, he immediately looked at the culprit, just in time to see Sakura form another seal. This time, instead of dango, he saw little orange books with wings attached to the edges that begun to float out in front of his vision. He recognized the design and size of the book. How could he have not? It was the same one he was holding now. However, despite their similarities, there were some very notable differences. Instead of a restricted stamp, however, there was an animated version of himself, barely visible due to the size of the cover, but it was large enough for him to see. He knew that it was him, as no one else could have had silver hair like his. The mini Kakashi was giggling over a much smaller replica of the book, his cheeks tinged with red as he continued flipping the pages. Anyone who was above the legal age limit required to purchase the book would know why. He tried not to twitch visibly. "Sakura-chan," he said with as much cheerfulness as possible, "would you mind not casting genjutsu on me?" The girl nodded sheepishly before resuming her bombardment onto her teammate. With a quiet sigh, Kakashi returned to his reading. Sakura had mastered the first component of genjutsu, joukei, or sight in layman's terms. It was easiest of the three basics to master and was also incidentally a stepping stone to the more difficult aspects of genjutsu, namely sense and feeling. Her skills were now good enough to maintain multiple and elaborate copies of an illusion together, a far cry from the one plain illusion that she was capable of only a week prior. Of course, what she was doing now was completely wasteful and useless in a combat situation, but it was a good exercise to test her abilities, so he allowed Sakura to continue with her little game. Genjutsu not only required skill but imagination as well for it to become truly effective. They had to be, seeing that they were capable of creating either heaven or hell at their slightest whim. He caught sight of two puddles as they walked down the road, and he immediately became suspicious. Without missing a beat, he strolled past the puddle, well behind his trio of genins and their client. Without warning or notice, chains whipped across the distance, binding Kakashi with a mass of sullied steel. The two ninja laughed, their voices distorted by the filter mask they wore. With a sharp pull, the razor-sharp chains tightened with tremendous force powered by the motors on the forearms. Kakashi screamed as he felt the steel bite into his flesh, before he was ripped apart in a swift moment later. Kakashi-sensei. Without stalling, they leapt towards Sasuke, who was the nearest, throwing their chains towards him, their metallic arms poised to strike his chest. No such luck as the boy avoided their lunge and snuck in a counterattack of his own. Despite being battered aside by the sharp blows, the duo continued their assault, forcing the Uchiha back lest he wished to be gutted by the sharp steel talons mounted on their hands. Then all too sudden and abrupt, one disengaged from the fight, sprinting past the boy towards Sakura just as he received a glancing blow. Sasuke neither had the time nor the opportunity to care, sending a swift kick towards his opponent. He had to believe in Naruto and Sakura for now. Sparing a glance towards them, he saw Naruto and the other ninja engage in brutal melee combat. The blonde was fast, but his opponent was faster, and he managed to slip past him with liquid fluidity. It was obvious that his target was Sakura and the trembling man behind her. But just as the claws were within reach, the nin fell, down by several well-placed blows to his gut, neck and knees, and an unexpected voice spoke loudly. "Well now, did you guys miss me?" Standing there nonchalantly and surprisingly whole, Kakashi held in his grip their would-be assailants, his eyes displaying the eternal boredom that he was famous for. Not too far off in the distance, Kakashi's torn and woefully unsalvageable Ika laid on the ground. "Darn, and that book was new too, aren't you feeling regretful?" Kakashi asked the ninja caught in his grip. When the nuke nin did not respond, he twisted the unarmored arm of his captive, enticing a pain groan which seemed to satisfy Kakashi. Sakura didn't know whether to hug him or punch him. Here she was scared sick, and all that idiotic excuse for a teacher could care about was a stupid perverted book. He was her teacher after all, but still, that was too much. She then did what any other female in her position would have done. A second later, Kakashi found himself entreated to a rather vivid illusion of him, a rubber duck and several other uncomfortable-looking objects that were about to be shoved into a very uncomfortable place. "Good to see that you missed me that much, Sakura," Kakashi said rather cheerfully, as if he didn't receive the particularly insidious image from his student, who was at the moment, currently fuming. He then nodded his approval to both Sasuke and Naruto, the former already having finished his fight with his opponent and was in the process of tying him up with wire. Kakashi then turned to Tazuna, who was now fidgeting and looking very nervous. "Well then, Tazuna dono," the Jounin started pleasantly with a crinkled eye, "you better start explaining, really fast." After his tale, Kakashi decided to continue the mission. Tying the two missing nins together for the ANBU to collect them, they set off once more. There were two reasons for this. The first was the policy that Konoha had devised for such situations. Should a mission be reevaluated as being higher as it should be, the shinobi in question are generally recommended to complete it if it is within their scope of ability. The second reason was somewhat connected to the first and had been the prime factor as to why he continued the mission in the first place. His team fared well enough by staving off the Demon Brothers of Mist, a pair of missing nins specializing in blitz and ambush tactics, showing off the fruits of the training they had gone through. That alone had proven that his faith in his students was not misplaced. Sakura had not been able to play an active part in it, though he knew what her level in Genjutsu was and accepted it. He wasn't lying when he said that it would take time for her to blossom. Unlike the other two on the team, Sasuke was swift and dangerously efficient, and while Naruto executed his moves with the traits, they were far more precise and calculated. Kakashi had no doubt that every ounce of strength Naruto put forth was painstakingly measured so as to avoid waste. Both of them had developed nicely regardless, and he entertained the thought of entering them in this year's Chunin examinations for a moment. But for now, he dismissed the thought for later reference. They had a mission to complete, after all. They had reached the main river channel where a boat was waiting for them. Silently, they boarded the boat, and soon, the clear weather gave way to a misty atmosphere, a thick fog settling around them like a veil. Almost immediately, the man maneuvering the boat shut off the engines, signaling for them to keep quiet, before using a paddle to propel the boat forward. Sakura could not help but feel curious. What was that about? The whole area is under surveillance by Gadu, and his lackeys are instructed to kill off any trespassers. So if you want to live, keep that pretty mouth of yours shut so that we all can make it in one piece. The man gruffly replied, and Sakura looked offended for a second before becoming quiet. They passed an incomplete stone bridge, entering one of the lower arches of the smaller connecting bridges into the mainland. Though it was in its infancy, Kakashi was certain that it could support the bulk of 100 or so wagons at a time. They alighted off at one of the makeshift docks, and with a curt goodbye, the man left with his engine roaring. "Now, shall we go on?" Kakashi cheerfully asked. "Tazuna dono, if you may." The route they were on was beset by thick vegetation on either side, providing ample, if not excellent, spots perfect for an ambush. Though he did not think that they would be attacked twice in a row, Kakashi preferred believe otherwise. Once again, his hunch proved correct when a huge flying sword came at them. All of them ducked, letting it embed itself into the bark of a tree. A second later, a figure blurred into existence, on top of the handle of the giant sword. Kakashi recognized him. Well, if it isn't Momochi Zabuza-kun, missing nin of the hidden mist. Zabuza was a tall and lean man. His upper body was not clothed, showing off the taut muscles in his forearms and abdomen. He was clad in camo pants and boots. His face was covered by a face mask, very much like Kakashi's, with his hidate wrapped around the side of his head. The man known as Zabuza snorted, and you appear to be sharing in Kakashi, what luck. He then crouched, his hand taking a hold of the hand of his sword. Still, my apologies, but the old man's mine. Surround and protect Tazuna Dono, Kakashi ordered simply, do not fight unless strictly necessary. When he stood and did nothing else, Zabuza looked affronted. What? No Sharingan? Well, if you live up to your name, Demon of the Mist, then perhaps I might take you up on that. The silver-haired Jounin replied in turn, causing the missing nin to laugh in response. I will make sure I will do my very best to make it so. He arched his back, preparing to leap at Tazuna before he stopped when Kakashi blocked his path. TCH, guess I got to fight you first, eh? Without any warning, Zabuza and his monstrosity of a sword disappeared in a blink of an eye, reappearing over at the nearby lake, his feet standing on it as if it were solid ground. He did not move, save place his left arm vertical to his body and his right into an activation seal just in front of his mouth. Ninpu, Kirigakure no Jutsu. The area which was foggy before turned even thicker as fog rolled over the lake and onto the ground. They could not see past 3 feet, much less Zabuza who has vanished with the fog. This is bad. Looks like I have to use it after all. Quickly, Kakashi rose his hidate that had been covering his left eye, revealing a long vertical scar that ran through the blood-red eye he sported. But it was not just any old eye, it was the Sharingan. And it was the first time Sasuke was shocked. Was Kakashi-sensei in Uchiha? But he had no time to think when Zabuza suddenly sprung from the fog, his sword intent on him and the old man behind him. But before he could bring his sword to bear, Kakashi grappled him with extreme prejudice, a kunai shoved into Zabuza's back as he did. However, he did not notice the figure behind him. Sensei, behind you. The body he held turned into water, and Kakashi stood rooted for a second. But a second was all Zabuza needed. Kakashi looked surprised for a moment before his features took on a more liquid quality. It was then the missing nin noticed something off. His palms were wet. A moment later, he felt water splash against him with Kakashi nowhere in sight. Now it was Zabuza's turn to look surprised. Mizu Bunshin. Did he copy it with just one glance? It's over. A glint of blackened steel appeared just beyond the corner of his eye. Zabuza stiffened in response. Oh really? A smirk was all the warning Kakashi received before he was thrown headfirst into the lake, various points on his body now burning with an intense pain. Though Zabuza did not attack straight away as he thought he would, Kakashi wasn't going to take any chances. He tried to move but his legs failed him, the water around him becoming especially heavy and dense. Panic entered him as he realized what was going to happen, but before he could do anything, he was immediately raised from the water, suspended within a glob which had engulfed him only moments before. It was at that moment when Kakashi began bleeding from multiple lacerations he did not remember receiving. I see you have tasted my blade technique, quite lovely isn't it? You wouldn't know that you've been cut until much later, and by then, you would be too weak to fight back. Zabuza reappeared at his side, his arm deep within the crimson glob. And here I was being worried about your skills. You're not so tough after all, Kakashi. Well, my clone can take care of you, so sit tight and watch. The man let go of the glob, and in his place, a perfect replica of himself morphed from the water below. The situation was grim, with Kakashi incapacitated and Zabuza himself after them. Any other genin would have broken by now. But they three weren't just any ordinary genin. Naruto glanced at Sasuke and he nodded. They formed seals, before letting out 2 large spheres of fire. The fiery projectiles raced across the distance, their heat scorching the very ground below them. It was almost surreal that Zabuza seemed content to just stand there and watch the attack which would herald his death if they met him head-on. Then just as they were about to hit, Zabuza swung his sword in an intricate pattern of parrying, rending the 2 fireballs into embers a scant second later. Is that all you got? He asked, before planting the tip of his blade onto the earth, which sizzled due to the immense heat emanating from the sword. How? Sasuke murmured to himself, but not as soft as he would have liked, for Zabuza heard him, attesting to his extremely acute sense of hearing. This baby here dispels chakra, in whatever form it takes, he said, patting the rapidly cooling blade. Quite a handy trait, don't ya think? He saw several kunai whizzing towards him and he shifted his position. Even though he was out of their path, his gut was screaming for him to move. It only took an instant for him to find out why. Air shimmered before revealing the kunai he thought he had dodged, while the ones he did simply vanished with a faint afterglow of chakra. Genjutsu. Because of the sudden appearance of the projectiles, Zabuza only managed to parry all but one, which cut his cheek. His fury-filled eyes turned to find the culprit. The 2 brats who threw the kunai were not his targets, though they were getting higher on his list of obstacles to destroy. No, what he wanted now was to find the damnable Genjutsu user who allowed the kunai to scratch him in the first place. His gaze finally settled on the girl whose hands which were locked into a standard Genjutsu array. How careless he had been, for a simple rookie girl to slip in an illusion. The insult was too great for him to bear. Fueled with rage, Zabuza leapt with surprising nimbleness for his size, his sword ready to deliver a mortal wound. You damn girl. But before he could cleave her, 2 fireballs came cascading towards him, forcing him to cease his attack. Another 2 more came at him, though this time he had not the luxury to dodge. Reforming the same intricate pattern he did before to dispel the jutsu, he promptly flipped back on the still waters of the lake before they could launch another salvo. As soon as his feet landed, he began making seals at a rate which was considered inhuman. "Since you brats like fire so much, let's see you did with this," he shouted for them to hear. Bubbles began to disturb the surface of the lake, and for every passing moment, it began more and more vigorously. At its climax, the water parted, giving rise to a large mass of water in the shape of a dragon. The dragon gave a shrill screech before launching itself towards the trio and their client. But as it was hurtling towards them with the grave promise of a swift death, Naruto whispered something inconceivable. "Suten, Suryuden no Jutsu." The impossible happened. Another dragon, an exact replica of the one that was about to drown them all, conjured itself from the Great Lake at triple the speed which Zabuza had done and slammed itself into Zabuza's dragon. It jarred to a stop, howling as it entered its death throes before finally dying as it reverted into water once more. "Impossible," Zabuza muttered, all the while watching as a Jin encountered his attack with the same attack of his own. He was cut short from his awe and fear, however, when he felt a sharp pain blossoming across his shoulder blades. Whipping his sword by instinct, he caught a glimpse of Kakashi, who was battered and bleeding heavily but still alive. "Yo," the Leaf Shinobi said once before driving his sandaled foot into Zabuza's gut. With an angry scream, he swung his blade, but Kakashi already had retreated to the safe vicinity of his students. Looking at the angry missing nin before him, Kakashi smiled. "Ah, I will have to thank my adorable little students later," he remarked with mirth. "They really distracted you there." Blood was from his face, but Kakashi casually wiped it off. "I would like to let you know that the same trick will not work on me twice." And then, almost as if he was bored, he spoke. "Now then, shall we continue? This is getting a little too much for me." Zabuza grimaced, hands forming a long string of seals. "I'm afraid we will settle this later. Enjoy." Finishing the last seal, he yelled out, "Suten, Deibakufu no Jutsu." A tidal wave erupted before him, rushing to engulf everything in its path. Waving, Zabuza fled into the nearby forestry. Almost instinctually, Sasuke jumped in front of them, slamming his hands to the ground with haste. "Daten, Yuuinaweiba no Jutsu." A high and wide barrier jutted from the ground quickly, and Sasuke was grateful he mastered the technique just as the waves crashed onto it, absorbing the fatal shockwave meant for them. Though they were all wet, it was much preferable than the other possibility had he not done it. Kakashi was in bad shape, and even now, blood flowed freely from his wounds. Whatever Zabuza did, it had been effective, for Kakashi began to stumble. He regained his balance, however, just when he was about to tumble. Well then, he turned to his students, as if completely unaware of the large gashes that peeked through his torn fabric. "That was tiring. I will leave the rest to you." And then, almost anticlimactically, Kakashi promptly fell face first into the water. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.